have my phone, so I can text you.
Okay. Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
You gotta wait till the video. You gotta wait till the picture shows up. Usually there's a picture. You go. Oh, there's Matt. Are we on?
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 o'clock, and we do have a quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, February 10th, and I just want to note that Board Member Fox is present via teleconference, and because of that, all votes will be done via roll call. Superintendent Schultz, would you like to review our agenda for the night?
So tonight you'll approve minutes from the 7th, 9th, and 13th of January. We have consent items around student travel and parent advisory, capital projects requests. For discussion, we have our first presentation on budget development for 2021. We're also going to have presentations from technology, community education, and student support, just to give a high viewpoint of the budget process for each of those areas. They're a big part of the district budget, so leaders in those budget areas will be presenting. In action tonight, you'll be approving the renovation bid, and you'll be approving the strategic plan directions, and also Policy 601. And information, we have some enrollment mobility reports, expenditure reports, some information on radon testing, and some staff recognition. So that's it. And I know there's some changes to that. I'll let you talk about those changes, Chair Ellenberg.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Schultz. It looks like we have some 9th grade government students in the audience. Is that true? Yeah? I won't be too offended if you guys leave around 8:01, so I assume there'll be a mass exodus around 8:01. I have two changes I would like to propose to the agenda tonight. First, I would like to remove the Achievement and Integration 3-year plan from the agenda, and I would like to add to the action portion of the agenda the establishment of polling places. Can I please get a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We will now vote by roll call to amend the agenda to remove the Achievement and Integration Plan and add to the action portion of the agenda the establishment of polling places.
Allenberg?
Aye.
Fox?
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Valentina?
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting agenda has been amended. Our first order of business, or I guess second now.
I have one other request for a change of agenda.
We'll do that when we get to consent. Was it the consent agenda issue? Yep. Our second order of business is to approve the minutes from the January 7th, 9th, and 19th work sessions, in addition to the January 13th regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We will now vote by roll call to approve the January 7th, 9th, and 13th meeting minutes.
Allenberg?
Aye.
Fox?
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Valentina?
Aye.
Thank you. The January meeting minutes are approved. We now have hearings from the audience. Thank you all for coming tonight to speak, and I would like to reaffirm our commitment to welcoming community input. We ask that you do not duplicate information that has previously been presented. If you have a complaint about individual employees, board members, or students in the district, please direct any of these comments to the appropriate site administrator, the superintendent, or submit them in writing to the board. The board typically does not respond or have discussions on any issues presented, but questions raised during the presentations will receive follow-up as directed by the board. I would like to remind all speakers that your presentations are limited to 3 minutes. When you have 15 seconds left of your 3 minutes, I'll prompt you to wrap up your presentation. Our first speaker tonight is Cindy Mullen, and just so we have a lineup, the next speaker after her will be Winnie Martin. Cindy Mullen? Welcome. Hi.
All right. So I'm Cindy Mullen. I'm a parent, a children's advocate, and I come from a long line of teachers, and I'm a teacher myself. In the past few months, I pulled out my 2 children from Edina Public Schools. I'm here today because I want to draw attention to the fact that our district is currently not collecting data on why families are leaving the district. I was not interviewed, surveyed, or asked why we left. My husband and I know dozens of families that have left over the last few years or are looking to leave. Yet, caring why all of these families are leaving is not an area of focus. There is, however, a concerted effort to focus on to recruit students to our district. And I know that there's an event next week at the high school to recruit people to our district. So to me, this is concerning because it indicates that the district is simply not interested in solving the problems of why people are leaving, and instead putting that focus on recruiting students to the district. At this point, because my kids are in a new school, I don't have any skin in the game. I don't have a dog in the fight. But for the kids still here, especially those that have parents that might not know the school system as well, are new to this country, don't come from a family of teachers, or don't have the time themselves to investigate what's going on their behalf, I want to draw attention to a key few reasons on why so many families are leaving, so maybe more of you can do more about it. Number one, we have an equity program that has not only widened the achievement gap overall, but parents of color and equity experts have openly objected to this because it has had the opposite effect. I looked at a board meeting from back in October 24th, 2016, and at about the 9-minute point, a professor, an equity expert, a woman of color, professor, said, "This is not working, please change it," but nothing's changed, and that was 2016. We have a 601 plan that was shot down by this board that would have allowed 50% of our student population ready for more challenge and rigor to get it through enrichment programs and honors classes. We have a controversial pre-AP English 10 curriculum that raised huge concerns by parents and was not deemed fit by board members here today as even fit for their own children, yet they advocated for it. Seriously, we are still touting the success story of this as a great program for our school.
Ms. Mullen, you have 15 seconds left.
All right. We have a personalized learning program that has been proven disastrous for struggling learners with LD, ADHD, dyslexia, literacy struggles, never had any data to support its effectiveness. And then we're also still pushing for heterogeneous classrooms, eliminating ability grouping, which is essential for effective delivery of instructions to students at their level.
Can you please wrap up your presentation?
All right. So there's so many more reasons, but please, I guess if we could sum it all up, if we would just look at the data and look at what works and doesn't work, a lot more families would be here and we wouldn't have to spend our time recruiting people to come in if we just could retain the people here by fitting their needs, looking at the data, and using the data to inform our decisions instead of what feels good.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Martin, and after Ms. Martin will be Wayne Wenger.
Good evening. At that age, I have to put my cheaters on all the time now. On January 6, 2018, consultant Paula Forbes and attorney Laura Booth led a facilitated discussion on the governance role of district board members. On January 4, 2020, attorney Trevor Helmers led board training on effective governance, understanding the rights, responsibilities, and risks of being a school board member. Both sessions were attended by the superintendent. Tonight, I would like to refer to the 34-page training document provided by Mr. Helmers, specifically page 3, E2. Individual board members have no authority to act on their own unless the board has delegated authority to an individual board member. The individual board member has no power to give orders, to supervise or evaluate an employee, to investigate a complaint, to formulate policies, or to take any other action on behalf of the board. Referring to page 5, section G. After the vote is over, the board acts with one voice. Regardless of which side of a vote an individual board member was on, a school board acts as a body, and it speaks as a body with one voice once the vote has been taken. Board members should not undermine board action. Board members are entitled to have their own view, and they are encouraged to share that view publicly when debating a motion. However, once a vote has been taken, the body has spoken, and no board member shall act to undermine the implementation of the board's vote. Motions to reconsider. On occasion, a school board member will be in the minority when voting for or against a motion. Unhappy with the result, the board member will move to have the board reconsider a motion. The board is not required to entertain such a motion. Under Robert's Rules of Order, a motion to reconsider may only be made by a member who voted on the winning side. If a board member who was not on the winning side of a motion moves to have the board reconsider the motion, the board chair shall rule the motion out of order. Ideally, the chair would state that under parliamentary procedure and the operating rules adopted by the board, a motion to reconsider may only be made by a member who voted in favor of the motion if it was passed, or against the motion if it was defeated. Based on this information, I wanted to ask tonight if the board has followed the appropriate process and policy that has led to the vote on Policy 601.
Ms. Martin, you have 15 seconds left.
Based on this information, has the board followed the appropriate process and policy that has led to the vote on Policy 601 as proposed by the superintendent and board chair tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Now we have Wayne Wenger, and after Wayne Wenger will be Chris Milquist. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Wayne Wenger. In November, the school board approved Policy 601, which filled 7 gaps in the academic program. It gave kids a choice of classes where there was no choice in classes. One example is the English 10th grade class. There is no choice currently. Everybody has to take the same class. Edina is the only school out of 37 metro schools that does not give students a choice. While the course was tweaked last year, it is still below state reading standards. One of the required readings is a graphic novel, which is at 5th grade reading level. That doesn't meet the needs of our 10th grade students, or all of the 10th grade students. We know Edina students are smart. 80% of them are above the 50% line on the national level. So we're smarter than the average student. Adding a higher level 10th grade class would challenge and stimulate our kids and allow them to make the progress that they should. The policy of the school board is that once a decision is made, everybody supports that decision and moves forward. That is not the case here. The school board is actively trying to rescind the policy that was approved in November, and none of the people that voted for the policy in November supported the rescinding motion. It's been about 3 months since the approval. In that time, the administration, teaching and learning, and the teachers could have explored the implications of the policy, what the cost is, how to make the new class work with existing classes, identifying schedule issues. Then the board would have answers about now to answer some of the concerns that were raised. And they'd be able to decide on the classes and schedule them for the next school year. Instead, we have delay, more studies, and a lack of urgency to respond to the academic gaps that were identified. When it is time to finalize the classes to be taught next school year, I don't think any of these classes will be ready based on the processes and what we've seen. Current 9th grade students will have no choice. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, and the result of that is going to be the fault of the school board. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Up next is Chris Milquist, and after that, Mike Levy. Hi, Chris.
Hi, thank you. My name is Chris Milquist. We have 2 daughters who are juniors at Edina High School. I'm speaking tonight about 3 years' worth of budget cuts to the Special Services Department and the growth of our special education student population. Nearly 18 years ago, our daughters were born totally unexpectedly and shockingly early. They arrived at 23 weeks gestation, weighing just 1 pound. They spent nearly 4 months in the hospital and have had scores of specialists, surgeries, doctors, therapists, therapies, and on and on. But our family is blessed that we live in this community where they have been able to be part of Edina Public Schools for nearly 16 years. They have had the most dedicated, compassionate, encouraging, and professional staff and teachers we ever could have imagined. And a major reason that our daughters have been able to thrive and achieve so much is because of the tireless efforts of these teachers and staff. Entering the world so early usually causes all kinds of problems. In our case, both of our daughters have some significant learning disabilities. And with their particular set of challenges, they straddle the dual worlds of special education and general education. And they're not alone. Medical advancements and earlier interventions have allowed an ever-increasing number of students to straddle those 2 worlds, and that is now becoming much more of the norm. But over the past 3 years, nearly $1.5 million has been cut from special services. Unfortunately, those cuts were being made as the special ed population in this district was growing, far faster than it ever had before and far faster than anticipated. So we now have more and more students needing to access fewer and fewer resources. I'm especially worried about the burden this growth has placed on our incredible special ed staff and teachers. Right now, with so many students and fewer resources, they are all too often overworked and overwhelmed, and they need your help. We talk a lot in this district about concepts of equity, diversity, inclusion, and the concept of all for all. But when we use those terms, we're rarely referring to or even including special ed students in those conversations. Here's the interesting thing about disabilities. They are the great equalizer. They don't care where you're from. They don't care what color your skin is. They don't care where you live, the language you speak, or how much money's in your bank account. Appropriate and adequate funding for special education is an equity issue. It is a diversity issue. It is an inclusion issue. These kids are all for all. I believe this board has a responsibility to do everything in its power to help special education. These students in particular start and live their lives with every possible disadvantage. So I'm asking you tonight to re-examine and restore the significant budget cuts that have been made to special services. Our staff and teachers need your help. Our families need your help. And most importantly, these amazing students need your help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Mike Levy is up next, and then Melissa.
I'm not sure I want to go after that. That was fantastic. It's going to be a little bit more of the same for me, but a little bit of a different angle. First, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Mike Levy. My family has lived in Edina for 13 years. My wife, Melissa, who's speaking after myself, we have 3 kids. Our oldest is Michaela. She's 11 at Southview as a 6th grader. We have Braden, who is a 4th grader at Normandale, and Mackenzie, who is a 2nd grader at Normandale. We're going to talk a little bit about Michaela and just who she is and what she's experienced as a 6th grader here at Edina. First, let me give you some background on Michaela. So at 1 year old, she had her first seizure. She actually was eating a piece of food and started choking as she was having her seizure, and her aunt had to give her the Heimlich maneuver as she was rushed to the hospital with her first seizure. From the age of 1 through 5, she'd having 50 plus seizures a day, and what would happen is they'd come in clusters for about 10 to 14 days, then they would go away for 3 months and they'd come back. And we didn't get an answer until she was 2, and she was diagnosed with something called monoclonic astatic epilepsy. Our neurologist told us there's good, bad, and ugly, and she's got ugly. And if you saw a picture of her today, she's anything but ugly. She is a thriving young girl because of the school system that we're in. So Michaela, just 2 years ago, was diagnosed with a very specific gene mutation, and underneath that gene mutation is everything underneath the sun. Low muscle tone, speech apraxia, seizures, challenges with behaviors. She is a girl who just goes. If anyone has kids and knows, you can give your kid a half a milliliter of melatonin at night, and they'll go to sleep in about 15 minutes. Our daughter gets 15 milliliters of melatonin, and it takes her anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour to go to sleep, and that's what somebody's sleeping or sitting in her room as she goes to bed. So let's talk a little bit about the transition. So this is her first year as a sixth grader. The teachers there, Jeannie Schaefer, Abby Olson, the team and the Peer Insight program have been remarkable for Michaela. When we moved to Edina, there are two things our realtor stressed the most for us, and that was school was one of the biggest things he highlighted as we were contemplating what town to live in. So what about Southview, Jeannie Schaefer, Abby Olson, and Peer Insight program? In the beginning of this school year, Michaela is a runner, meaning she doesn't sit still. She literally runs. And when you're in public with her, you have to hold her hand. She doesn't understand stranger danger. She doesn't understand cars and sidewalks and busy streets. Michaela was not fully potty trained, despite us trying to do that. She wears a pulp at times. Michaela is inconsistent in her use of speaking. She is nonverbal and uses an iPad to help communicate. Michaela started off in a stroller 95% of the time in the beginning of the school year, and Michaela had no friends. She's nonverbal. She's a special needs kid, and no one really wants to pay attention to her. So what's it look like today for Michaela in the school district? Michaela is spending chunks of her day out of her stroller. She's walking the halls with her Peer Insight group friends who are reading a book to her as she's answering those questions with her iPad. That's a long way from where she started at the beginning of the school year. Michaela doesn't wear a pull-up in school, and she has barely any accidents at all. Self-dignity for her. She's 11. Michaela has friends. The Peer Insight program, they come over to our house on Sundays. They come over on Tuesdays. They come on Thursdays. She's got a group of 10 to 15 friends. Last week, we went to her sixth grade choir class. In that sixth grade choir class, she sat through her entire sixth grade performance. That's first. Second, we as a family and my two younger kids and wife went to pick her up afterwards in her stroller. And as we were leaving, there must have been 15, 20, 25 kids coming up to her as we were walking saying, "Great job, Michaela. Awesome job, Michaela." And what brought tears to our eyes was our 10-year-old son said, "Wow, Mom and Dad, Michaela's got a lot of friends. They really like her." It was something so simple as that. So a couple of things in closing as my time wraps up. I do understand there's been some budget cuts the last 3 years in special education. I understand there's some being contemplated going forward. And you just heard one of my colleagues speak much more eloquently than I will on that comment. But in the special education handbook, it states Edina Public Schools embraces the all-for-all mindset for every child who attends school in our community. My daughter doesn't have a voice. I need your help being her voice. I need your help in advocating for Michaela and people like Michaela. It's your responsibility. Frankly, it's all of our responsibility to ensure an all-for-all mindset, access to curriculum, and due process. I urge you to remember my story and my wife's story about our girl Michaela and where she started at the beginning of the school year and where she's at today because of the great work with Jeannie Schaefer, Abby Olson, two girls you're going to hear later from the Peer Insight program, and all the kids that support that. Decisions by this board have an impact, negatively or positively, on how it affects kids, particularly kids most in need. If you give these kids access to paraprofessionals, technology, support, and fully fund special education, these kids too will be the best versions of themselves, just like my daughter, Michaela, has and thrived today. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next is Melissa.
I'm Melissa Levy, Michaela's mom, and Mike just spoke about the Peer Insight program, which obviously we can't say enough good things about. I'm here today because I have a concern about looking ahead to the summer programming and the fact that there are no opportunities for my daughter now that they've removed the Summer Sonic. This is a picture of Michaela, what she was like before the Peer Insight programs. She's at her sister's game. She's at her brother's game. She's with me. Now, if anyone else wants to see, that's her in her stroller. So moving into Southview this year, these are now what her days look like. She's with her peers. She is still out and about in the community, but she actually has friends. The importance of the summer programming is so that she can be with her peers. I called to find out what happened to the program and was told that it was revamped. It was revamped so that there are morning camps and afternoon camps. Those camps are art-oral. They're preparing for college, taking your SATs. There are no classes that my daughter can attend. I have asked what support is going to be provided, and we have no answers. I have asked what class can my daughter take. I have asked the inclusion manager. She cannot give me an answer. She tells me she works from K through 5. So who's looking out for our kids starting at 6th grade? Everyone has passed the phone to somebody else. Nobody has given me an answer. I want to know where my daughter can go this summer and be with her peers. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, we have Ava, is it Holly, and Josie Moe?
Hi.
Hi, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Ava Hawley. And my name is Josie Moe, and we are students at Southview Middle School, and we have been part of the Aspire and Peer Insight program for 2 years now. And we love it so much. So far in those 2 years, I've made so many friendships and connections with my classmates. It has changed me in so many ways, and I now see everyone the same. And I've realized no matter the physical or cognitive disabilities my peers have, they should all be able to do the same things that kids without disabilities get to do, like hanging out with friends and being included in things, not only in school but out of school as well. The friendships I've made through this program mean so much to me, and it's the highlight of my everyday getting to hang out with my Aspire friends. I think that being a Peer Insight has made a huge impact on my life. I view life from a different perspective now because I got to take a chance to step in the footsteps of some of my Aspire friends. I know how important it is now to be as inclusive as possible in everything I do, because no matter who you are, we all deserve friendship. And not only do we deserve friendship or relationships at an elementary and middle school level, but all people deserve relationships throughout their whole lives. If there was a loss in funding in the program, it would change my life immensely because I wouldn't be as connected with my Aspire friends, and we'd be separated instead of being together. The funding of this program is valued because we also get to do fun things like going to the mall, going skiing, and going to the zoo, which really helps use life skills, and it's so much fun getting to hang out outside of school. I would love if this program could grow and we could continue it at the high school. Peer Insights is one of the best things that's happened to me. The importance of the Special Education Fund is key to allowing all Aspire students to have a chance to hang out with their friends while doing fun activities, such as bowling, basketball, shopping, and much more that all include out-of-school skills. It gives students a chance to connect one-on-one with their friends and to make everlasting memories. So having the Special Education Fund is crucial for helping students make extra connections outside of your everyday classroom while doing fun activities they don't normally get to do. I think it is very important to also continue the special education program throughout the high school level because there are so many lost connections through the transition between middle school and high school. This Peer Insight program has made so many children's middle school experience so much better. Thank you for listening to me speak and share my experiences with this amazing program. We are so very passionate about this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming and for your engagement in our district. We're now going to move on to our consent agenda. Oh, there's a back to my page. Wow. I apologize. It's always useful to turn pages over. We have two more speakers, Kaylee Roth and Bridget Shane. I apologize. Come on up. Thank you, Sarah.
You don't like double-sided.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Bridget Shane.
I'm Kaylee Roth, and we are students at Southview Middle School and have been a part of Peer Insights for about 5 months.
Peer Insights has impacted me in so many positive ways. One way that it has impacted me is because of all the connections I've been able to create with the students from Aspire. Kaylee and I both have gotten so close with them that we now hang out together out of school and have Sunday night dinners, go to Sky Zone, see movies, have sleepovers, and so much more. Peer Insights has also impacted me impacted more than just Southview students. After I joined the program and started spending time with my friends from Aspire out of school, our families got to know each other and have become close friends too.
As we started the school year, we didn't know what to expect from this program, but now we have gotten to know everyone and we look forward to coming to school just because of it. Whenever I walk into the room, everybody's always having such a fun time and smiling.
My experience in this program so far this year has been amazing. The Aspire program is such a welcoming, fun, and inclusive group of people, and it has been such a privilege to be able to hang out and get to know such amazing people in it. The best part of my day is when I see my friends from Aspire in the hallway and we have nicknames, give each other handshakes, or just hugs. What I've learned from Peer Insights this year is that it isn't a program to help the students from Aspire, but it's to make connections that you have in and out of school.
The first day I walked into room 143, I was a little nervous because I didn't quite know them. The first thing that caught my attention was a girl named Michaela with a big smile waving me over. I immediately started smiling and walked right over to her. The next day, I got her mom's number, and now we hang out every single weekend. I'm so blessed to be a part of her life.
Because of the fun, this program has been able to branch out and do fun field trips like bowling, skiing, dances, polar plunge, and so much more. We are so grateful to be able to have a special education fund because it lets us do so much. If we lost this fund, then we wouldn't be able to make stronger connections with one another and have the opportunity to go on these trips.
I would like to end by saying that this program would not be possible if it weren't for Ms. Schaefer and Ms. Olson. They are truly the most amazing teachers you could ever have. They are always kind, being goofy, and making people laugh. They both have bonds with the kids that no one has seen. Before the start of the school year, I had no clue what I wanted to be when I'm older, but now I have the hope to be a special education teacher just like them. We want to say a big thanks to them and let you two know how much we appreciate you and all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Mauricio Lorio. Is here? Mauricio? No? Okay, now we are officially finished, and I won't say my spiel again. We're going to move on to our consent agenda now. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda?
I would. I'd like to pull the superintendent's contract.
Okay. Anything else? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We will now vote by roll call to approve the consent agenda.
Ellenberg?
Aye.
Fox? Green?
Aye.
Jones? Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Wallen Friedman?
Aye.
The consent agenda has been approved. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent employment agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
The reason why I'd like to pull it is that of all the contracts we approve, the superintendent's contract is probably the most important, and I don't think it's a real good idea to pass it on a consent, and I think it deserves some discussion in front of the public. I would actually prefer it to come up for vote, excuse me, next month. Give the community a little more time to look at the contract, to get some feedback.
I just wanted to note that the HR committee unanimously recommended the approval of John's new contract, and for the community, it's a 3-year contract with 1% salary increase for each year. His last contract was a 1.25% salary increase for each year. And so both the HR committee and John were trying to be we realized that there are budgetary constraints in the district, and so we were trying to be sensitive to those. So he did agree to a lower salary adjustment. So the HR committee, we are excited to offer him this contract and have him help guide us through the strategic plan implementation. So I just wanted to go over publicly the parameters of the new contract that the HR committee presented to the board at the work session.
I'd like to respond to pulling it off. I I'm not on the HR committee, but I do trust the diligence of the HR committee and the work that they did. With the new contract, it was updated in alliance with MSBA, the Minnesota State Board Association, to add boilerplates and to make sure that we are as transparent as possible, and I added a lot of really good language. On top of that, we had legal review that went through for the contract. So I'm not sure if you're asking for community feedback, is that our entire community that you're looking for? Or I need some more parameters around what you mean by community feedback, I guess, in reviewing it. Because typically in the past, we wouldn't send the superintendent's contract out for feedback from the community in a survey form or anything. So I need some more parameters from you on that.
What I mean by that is now the contract has been in board book, and so it's publicly available. Right. People can read it, and if they have some comments or reactions to it, they have some time to digest it and reflect on it and give us feedback. I do agree that I'm seeing improvements in the language, and there's more that's been brought in from MSBA model language, which I think puts us in a better position. But I'm just uncomfortable on principle with it just coming through so quickly and it being perhaps the most important contract that we approve as members of the board.
Oh, and can I ask which parts of the contract do you think are most important that we get feedback? The two main things that we're talking about are the term and the salary. So those are the big changes. Are you?
Well, for instance, as Erica alluded to here, John's salary increase proposal is 1%. That's not inflation. And so actually John, in real terms, would be taking a pay cut. And in an era of pay cuts, of budget cuts, that's actually noble, and I think that's good. And I think that would be something that the community would be aware of and something to settle in on. It's a shared sacrifice. We're talking about a 1, 2, or 3 year extension. How does the community feel about that? It's been basically approved by the HR committee, and good. You did due diligence, appreciate that. But I would like this to be just more public than it has been, and up for more public review.
And so I also have, I just would like to get some feedback from the board on a few items that, while I can appreciate that the board has decided to make the language in his contract mirror the language of the Minnesota School Board Association, in doing that, when I looked through the two documents, the proposed new contract and the MSBA language, there are some changes that are significant enough that I think we should discuss them as a board. One in particular is with respect to outside activities. The MSBA template includes the following sentence. I will read the whole paragraph on outside activities. While the superintendent shall devote full time and due diligence to the affairs and the activities of the school district, he or she may also serve as a consultant to other school districts or educational agencies, lecture, engage in writing and speaking activities, and engage in other activities if, as solely determined by the school board, such activities do not impede the superintendent's ability to perform the duties of the superintendency. That is what is currently in the contract, but what is missing is the following statement. However, and this is a statement that's in the MSBA model contract, however, the superintendent may not engage in other employment, consultant service, or other activity for which a salary, fee, or honorarium is paid without the prior approval of the school board. And it is my feeling that it's important that the board understand that Superintendent Schultz's number one role is to be superintendent of Edina Public Schools. And that focus is very important. And without this final sentence, which is recommended not only by our state school board association, but it is found in other state school board association model policies, I feel as if we would be remiss in our obligation to make sure that we are fulfilling our roles.
So we actually did take a look at that particular provision, and the first sentence already gives us the authority to say that he can't have outside employment. The second sentence doesn't really add much. The first sentence already says it's our absolute discretion as to whether he can do anything paid or unpaid. So it's already covered by the first sentence.
How would we know?
How would we know? Actually, I think we already know that our superintendents historically have taught classes.
Right. Well, and my feeling is that this gives transparency to those things. I actually am delighted that John is teaching a course and may be representing us in other activities. But I also feel strongly that the board should know what those activities are.
On principle, I'm uncomfortable with this also because the community might want to know this, that we had a work session on this on Thursday, in which the contract was walked in. Ordinarily, those contracts and documents are given to us a number of days in advance. It was walked in, we saw it right then. Erica provided a very good explanation, thank you. But over the weekend, a couple of things were found by community members, and much of the business of the board is done first by putting major pieces of decision-making on the discussion for a school board meeting and in 1 month, and then the next month, we vote on it. And I would be in favor of scheduling a discussion next month and then voting on it in April.
Actually, contracts usually aren't done that way. Contracts usually are via consent. That's the standard practice for us. We don't usually ever discuss contracts at board meetings like this and then vote on them. They're almost always done via consent. As far as the sentence at issue that Ellen brought up, the discussion that we had was, I'm not going to reiterate what Lenny said, but we also felt that it was going to be a waste of district resources to every year have a lawyer write up we would have to every year have a lawyer write up addendum to John's contract giving him permission to teach the class that we already know that he teaches. And we just really felt it was not only a waste of monetary resources, but also a waste of time to have him to go through that process when this clearly states that if we ever feel there's a conflict, that he's not focusing his attention on the school district, this gives us the legal right to bring that to his attention. So the second sentence doesn't give us any more authority. It basically adds a legal step that we would have to undertake every year, where we would have to take monetary resources, we would have to have an addendum to this contract, and we felt that for the price that would cost, it doesn't really gain us anything from anything from a contractual perspective. I realize that you disagree, but that's how we felt.
Can I also add to, I want to push back on a comment that you made, Owen. Between myself, Lenny, and Erica, and then the time also that Trevor put into going through this contract, I don't necessarily think it's fair to say that members of the public found things in there. There's nothing hidden in the contract, and there's nothing that's done with any bad motives, right? There may be wording that in John's existing contract that he's still on right now, that wording is what makes sense for our district. It may not be the exact wording from MSBA, and that's okay. We didn't take their entire contract and lift it and turn it into an Edina contract, because there still needs to be some personalization for our district and for the agreement between us and our superintendent, right? There's negotiations that take place that he agrees to that this wording may not make sense, and that's the agreement we have with him, and that's what brought him to our district. So there may be some wording that's different, but we kept with the wording that makes sense for our district and for what we have in agreement with John for his contract, if that makes sense. So there's nothing, between the three of us and Trevor, this has been gone through with a fine-tooth comb many, many times. And we've been very intentional about the changes that we made, things we added, things we took out, whatever. So just want to make sure you know that.
So I also just want to note that the prior contract had no paragraph dealing with outside activities. That was something that we added in discussion with John. And so it went from nothing in there to something saying that it's up to the discretion of the board. So this is an addition. It's just that we, and Eric has already explained, part of our thought process on the second sentence.
So I guess my question is, do we have individuals that, I would like to get, I guess, a flavor for how the majority of the board is feeling, that are comfortable with the language as is and are comfortable with approving the contract? Or do we have individuals that feel like they want to bring this back to a work session next month? Because I think that we can move forward with what individuals would like to do.
Okay, so yes, that's a good thing to say, but I have a couple other issues with this contract, so I think it's a little premature for that.
Well, I think if we have the majority of board members that are comfortable with the language in the contract, I think I'm trying to understand where.
Well,
board
not
members-
all of the items that are different from the MSBA contract to this contract have been discussed.
Right, but we might have multiple board members that like the contract as is what I'm trying to get at.
In an effort to just make sure we stay on track, why don't we take
That's
the
all I'm
pulse
trying
and
to
see?
understand.
I'm comfortable with the language. Like I said, I've been through it a lot. So I'm going to say that I am comfortable with the language, if anybody else wants to chime in an effort to keep moving.
I'm also comfortable with the language. I think, Owen, you brought up the timing, and I think having leadership embark on a new strategic plan that also mirrors 3 to 5 years is key, not only for our district, but for our students and our teachers and our community. So I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Matt, do you have any comments on the contract?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the language as is. This went through a committee. It was thoroughly vetted. Language was added to the elements that are being raised. If the issue is not around income or length of time served, and it's more about some small wording on some contract language that I think is sufficient to capture the essence and the legal right to make sure someone doesn't act out of accordance, I would very much want to move on with this contract and get John in place. It's also a competitive environment, and I think that we had discussed this as a board multiple times, and the committee discussed this, and I think that stalling this for a month doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, I will add my own comments here. I do respect the work of the committee. However, I also feel that this board hasn't had its normal time to reflect on what was being proposed, because it was walked in. And so I did have several questions. I had questions about how the accrual language for vacation was worded, also for sick leave, but most importantly, this outside activity sentence that is missing, that would just lead transparency to other activities beyond the duties. The other item is also, there's a continuation of insurance coverage, and I am not sure if this benefit has been negotiated as part of the broader EPS contract or teaching staff. And if so, then forget it. Forget the comment that I made. I'm really sorry that I did not have an opportunity to bring this up at the work session since I did not see the contract. I agree with Owen. This is perhaps the most important thing that this board does, and to be able to have the time to review the contract at a work session and then bring up questions at a board meeting, I think, is appropriate due process. But the question that I have is the EPS language obligates the district to continue paying for health, dental, and life insurance from the end of the superintendent's employment until he is eligible for equivalent coverage elsewhere or for Medicare, which is an extensive benefit. And my question would be, is this a benefit that's been negotiated?
So it was negotiated at the time of the initial contract 3 years ago, and actually this is a section that we pulled out and looked at again this particular time and discussed the terms of this, both whether this is something that should continue and what the expectation was of the superintendent. So this is a particular paragraph that we did pull out and have a lengthy discussion on. And it's really a continuation of what was offered on the prior contract.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say one other quick thing. I mean, is there something we're not saying? Because to me, there's an insinuation that this was fast run by the group, which is not the way this was done. And I don't want that perception out there. So if the money at a pay cut relative to inflation, the time horizon was approved and agreed upon by the board, and now we're playing with words around a secondary clause as to whether or not reporting of outside activities, a little bit of vacation clarity, and something else. I mean, is there something else that wants to be brought up so we can see whether or not we're all in alignment with the proposal? Because end of day, this stuff feels pretty minor and also kind of, I think, makes us look like we're not as thorough as we have been. So is there a question behind the question, or is it literally the timing of getting a contract? And I'm kind of confused as to why we're having this conversation.
Good question, Matt. For me, it's fundamentally the discussion. I think what we've been talking about here has been healthy. I was aware of this sentence being left off this weekend, and I was wondering why it was left off, what happened. And I feel I didn't have time to actually settle in on the language and review it, hear other people's comments, and what else is there in there that is kind of a surprise. I don't know, but I agree, Erica, most of our contracts are done by consent. This one is of a different order, and so I would view it differently and would just simply like to have a more robust evaluation of it. And I think that would communicate to the district, Matt, that we are earnest about dotting our I's and crossing our T's.
Can I also just add, because I want to make sure that the public is clear about the timing. So we did know that this was going to be on our, was it Thursday meeting? Thursday meeting. So we all knew it was going to be on our Thursday meeting, even though the document wasn't done because there were still negotiations going on with John, so it couldn't be in our board book. We all knew that it was coming, and we all had the ability to go in and look at both John's existing contract, and we all have access to the MSBA contract. So when we received it on Thursday, we had over an hour to sit and go through as a group. How many pages is this, 4 or 5? If you ask any of these ninth graders, 4 or 5 pages in over an hour is, we had an opportunity. I want to make sure that people don't think this was rushed in and we didn't have time to look at it, because I don't want that perception out there in the public, because it's unfair. That's not what was done. We've also had from Thursday to today to really digest it. I just need to put that out there as a member of the HR committee to make sure people know that we did everything that we could. So I'm just going to put that out there.
So I think that we have enough information to decide that we should, I don't think we have enough support to move this to another month, and I don't think that there's much more to discuss about this. I think that we should now vote, and we need to vote by roll call to approve the superintendent contract agreement. Aye.
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 Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Nay.
Shaw?
Aye.
Wallenfriedman?
Aye.
Thank you. Now we are going to move on to discussion, and we have 4 items up for discussion, the first being the budget development plan with John Toop. So, John, you're up.
I'll kick this off. So with the budget report that's on this agenda was also presented to the board in a work session prior to this meeting. So we're going to first give a brief overview of where our budget's at with regards to the level of cuts and how we've used revenue generation as well as proposal for expenditure reductions. And then we'll go specifically into those reductions and then take any comments and questions the board may have after that. So John, do you want to kick it off?
Yes. Good evening, Chair Allenberg, Superintendent Schultz, members of the board. Tonight we will present the budget alignment plan for fiscal 2021. As Dr. Schultz mentioned, we went over this in detail at a board work session earlier tonight. We're trying to balance all the things I heard tonight earlier in the open agenda with also keeping a strong fund balance at the 6% level and a AAA bond rating. So with that in mind, as we did the budget parameters, I put them into the budget forecasting model that I use, and trying to keep the fund balance at 6% resulted in a number that was $1,006,341 that we were short. So at that point, we were looking at first revenue enhancements, because that does not impact the classroom. And we have a number of things that came up recently that we can add to the budget for 2021. A couple of them I'll mention. Excel energy rebate for the stuff that we were doing at ECC and other buildings. We did get a rebate of $119,000 for that. And then you also see on your consent agenda earlier some terms of agreement for cell towers in the form of a lump sum payment. We did go through that with the Finance and Facilities Committee. We discussed that over 5 different meetings before we came to an agreement on that. And that's about $360,000 as well there. One other small payment too. And so we came up with revenue enhancements of about $520,000. So you subtract that from about the $1 million, and we're left with expenditure reductions that we'll need to look at in the amount of about $545,000. So those were the amounts that we looked at as we developed our expenditure reduction plan. And we went over that tonight with the board in a work session. We have a number of different reductions there, but we also have a couple of enhancements to the budget as well. I think I'll stop there and see if there's questions from the board.
Okay, so just to go through the reductions, so if we look at a reduction of $500,000 is what John's directing us to do. We have a reduction of a grade 3 section at Concord with that grade level going into 4th grade with a higher class size guideline. We are transferring general fund expenditures to the capital projects levy, so there's several expenditures, services that are in the general fund that can be charged or picked up by another fund, which is called the capital projects levy. So we're reducing the general fund and transferring $100,000 to that levy. We are asking for a reduction at the high school of $400,000, which will be primarily an FTE reduction and adjusting classes so that there would be less teachers, approximately 4 less teachers at the high school. We have contingencies in the assistant superintendent's office to manage staffing overruns and or increased enrollment. So we haven't used that contingency as much over the last few years, so we are going to reduce that in half by $50,000. Same with the superintendent contingency, my contingency to handle those things that unexpected costs that may come up. I haven't used that over the last few years, so we're going to reduce that. Those two contingency changes, if we need more staffing, may impact the board coming back together to release more funding for some of the things, unexpected things that may happen. Then we looked at the district office, And within strategic planning, as the board is going to approve a strategic directions, and we have a strategic planning coming to an end, we won't need those resources, so we're cutting $20,000 out of that. There's a census that manages the demographics of students that we're going to actually shows a reduction. We're actually going to transfer that also as part of into the capital projects levy. We have a reduction in special education related to Jeff reorganizing some of the leadership within his office, and teaching and learning is going to reduce some of the training we'd give to new teachers a bit by $15,000, for a total of $100,000. So those are the reductions that we're bringing forward. So I'll stop there if there are any questions or comments related to that. So what we're proposing for budget enhancements is the high school is planning to provide more service to our ninth graders as they transition from our middle schools, and team the ninth graders with teaching teams so that we can provide more support for that transition from the middle school to our high school. So the high school is proposing a counselor be added. This also reduces the counselor-student ratio in the 10-12, as well as in the ninth grade. So that's a reduction of that ratio. The second we're adding is special education para support, as well as dollars to intervention. And so we're giving Mr. Jorgensen and Dr. Smazel the opportunity for them to develop the intervention program more thoroughly and to provide special education para support. And then last is an addition of 0.55 FTEs, about $55,000 to a multilingual. As you heard in the presentation last month, there's a need for more staffing in that. So those are the additions that we would add in this 2021 budget proposal. So that is the proposal that is out there. Well, the plan for this is this will be presented, of course, to Finance and Facilities Committee, and then brought back for a preliminary approval of the budget in March, and then the board does a final approval of the 2021 budget in June.
Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go.
I was going to make the observation just to confirm it. So we have heard from a number of special advocates. We would have a net $85,000 gain in special ed. Is that another way to interpret this?
I think we'd be, yeah, you could, for the total special education budget, I would say that the difference is that the special education para support is more as service related to the students, whereas the $15,000 above is more for the administration of the special ed program. Okay.
Matt, did you have a question or comment?
I was going to make the point that I think John and the team have done a really good job, especially the Finance and Facilities Committee, of considering all the different areas where we can and cannot make cuts. It's really imperative that we think about what's happening in the classroom versus outside. That's a huge lens that's used. And one consideration that's not always understood is districts keep what's called a capital reserve, and that's an important metric of the financial stability of a district. In Edina, we just had a AAA bond rating last year, which puts us at the top of the state. However, maintaining a strong fiscal balance is really important, and it gives us the leverage to make better decisions going forward, especially if economic times change. So right now, the numbers that John has presented continue to target a 6% fund balance in the capital reserve segment. It may be of consideration for the board in the coming months or even year to consider whether that number should be the same or should possibly be higher. But that, again, is something that we weigh along with both the revenues that we receive as well as the way that we manage our cuts. So I think that it's just important for people to understand that in the balance of the way that the district manages its funds, there's a classroom lens used first, and then secondly, there's thinking about what is the way that we maintain stability. We did 2 bond reissuances last year. One saved over $1 million for the district, and one saved over $1 million for the taxpayers. So there's a lot of thought being given as to how we manage our funds at all times. You'll hear more on the tech levy even today. That's a really important levy that supports a lot of really instrumental activities across the district. Some of it relates very seriously to safety, student safety. So I want people to just think about when they see cuts and other things, we're really doing our best to manage public funds and do that conservatively while focusing on the classroom first. But any questions, of course, please continue to direct them to John and the team. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So I think you're stuck here for the next
I
presentation.
think I am.
Yep.
Yes.
And Steve, we're going to discuss the technology levy budget.
Good evening, Chair Allenberg, Superintendent Dr. Schultz, and fellow board members. I too need to use cheaters at this age, fortunately. Tonight I'm here to, with the assistance of John, to provide an update on the technology levy. It's a financial update, and so what you will hear is not a lot about how the technology is being used in the classroom. I did provide an update in October for the board, and I'd be more than happy to do this so again. But this is more of a financial update. The first.
You also provided a very detailed update this week on finance and facilities.
Thank you. Yeah, as chair, or as board member Matt Fox said, I did provide an update at the finance committee earlier, or last week. The first thing I want to bring up is that there is a technology vision that the district uses as a lens on how we make decisions. It has four key components that I'd like to point out. Not a lot of them to do with technology, but I think they're important levers of how technology gets used. One is how do you unleash a passion for our students in learning? We know that students that are motivated tend to learn and will be more engaged in learning. Two, our greatest assets are our teachers. And as you know, we are in an industry that is about people. And so how do we empower those educators and make them exponentially more powerful in their work? Three is how do we engage our community, our parents, in this learning continuum? Because it's not just about the teachers, it's not just about the students, but how do we partner and how do we become stronger and provide information to our community and our parents? And then fourth, how are we just being good stewards of the investment that the community has provided in technology? Next slide. We've broken the technology budget down into the following areas. Staffing and professional development, which means exactly that, is the cost of the staffing and then providing professional development that is technology related. Construction is the amount of the construction or the facilities renovation that has a technology focus and therefore is, we use the technology levy to pay for. Hardware, which is a big portion of it, is not only our student devices, such as iPads, Chromebooks, but also our teacher devices and some of our board members' devices as well. AV is the type of tools that our teachers use in their classroom, which is becoming increasingly important as we look at some aging equipment in our classrooms. Infrastructure is our network, internet, phones, security, and related hardware. Non-instructional software is the software we use to provide the systems that support the school district, and instructional software is the software that we use to directly interact with instruction. Next slide. So I just want to bring up a couple major accomplishments that we've had in this. We do offer a number, previous slide, a number of face-to-face classes and professional development, and we try to do it anytime, anywhere learning, and so a lot of the excitement we've had is taking some of our professional development. We'll always offer it face-to-face, but we're increasingly putting modules into our Schoology class, and so our teachers, our paras, our administrators are leveraging the same tool that our students are using for professional development anytime, anywhere. Hardware, it's that continued maintaining our standard of devices. And then as you notice this year, as we are migrating at the middle school level to a one-to-one technology device for our 6th and next year for our 7th grade students. We're implementing a new future-ready digital standard for our elementary classrooms, and this summer, or this spring, we'll start that work in 3 of our elementary schools. Infrastructure, thanks to your support, we are upgrading our wireless and our wired network. And just to give you an example of that in our non-instructional software, this weekend we did have a power outage in Edina. And I'm happy to report that though there is a power outage, all the technology except for in one school maintained running even during the power outage. So our wireless network, the portal, the telephone systems, all that remained running even though there was power out in the Edina area. And then our instructional software, things like the portal, things like our Edina apps that our teachers and students and our parents use to act. The 2019-2020 revised budget is a little, almost $6.5 million. And our largest portion of that is, of course, staffing and professional development at about a little over 48%, followed by our hardware, or those devices we purchase, our non-instructional software, our construction costs, so that is that shift that we took from the tech levy to pay for the technology-related construction renovations, and then our instructional, our AV, infrastructure, repair, consulting, and supplies. Next slide. I do want to point out one area that warrants a little bit of additional discussion. And under infrastructure, we are running over budget to the tune of 365% over budget. And so that would be a cause for asking some additional questions. And so next slide. I want to detail how that happened. It isn't that we're over budget as much as there's some accounting, and John, my esteemed colleague on my right, can help me if I make a mistake here. But we budgeted about $142,000, but we spent almost $500,000, so it shows a difference of $377,000. Some of that was known. For instance, we did know that there was going to be E-rate revenue. E-rate revenue is the money we get from the federal government to offset technology purchases as part of the E-rate program. We also received a security grant from a community member for the high school that was able to, for $50,000, that allowed us to put additional security cameras in, to harden our exteriors, and to do some more monitoring for our technology and our security at the high school. And then the telephone upgrade was actually a purchase that we made last spring, but it was coded to this school year as opposed to last school year. And so it was just a coding shift. The money was set aside in last year's budget and is available in the excess. And then we did always assume that we were going to leverage $100,000 of our carryover fund, of which we had in our budget. And so those additional revenues help offset that $377,000 over budget in that area. And we don't plan on making any more significant spends in that area, so we believe we'll end this year at that amount. Next slide. If you look, this is our technology levy amounts over time. The blue is the revenue and the red is the expenditure. We've always stayed below. Thankfully, our expenditures have stayed below our revenues, and that green area is that carryover that I mentioned. So some of that carryover was used to offset the renovations, and some of that's going to be used in the next year to help with assist with the elementary future-ready digital classrooms. Next year, John has said that the revenue for the technology levy is going to be a little over $6 million, or $6,277,000. And you'll see that we plan to spend just a little bit over that, but again, we have that carryover dollars, so we'll work that down. Next slide. Just some items that we want to stay on and watch is that we do see staffing increases in the technology levy, and so we are an industry of people, and so it is necessary to support the technology. It's necessary to have people using the technology, and as more and more systems come on, we do have staff that manage, maintain, and leverage that. And then there may be some additional costs with building renovations that will come in the tech levy. And I work closely with Eric Hamilton and John to make sure that those are accounted for. Next slide. So going forward, as mentioned earlier, next slide, the tech levy, that is current tech levy, does expire in the fall of 2021. So that marks the completion of that 10 years of that tech levy, but it doesn't mark the completion of the needs of the funding. We're going to continue to need funding to ensure that we're equipping our staff and students with technology that works. If we stop in 4 years, that technology is no longer going to be working or breaking down. It's important that we are cognizant of that and make sure that we are updating technology. We also provide quite a bit of professional development for our staff. We need to continue to support the organization on their use of technology. So that means making sure that when something breaks, that a teacher doesn't have to spend time fixing that, and we have technology support folks that can come and help and assist those teachers to get that equipment back up and running quickly. But also to support our teachers on the effective use of that technology. So it's not all about making sure that things are working, but that we're using that technology appropriately. Through access to the internet, online resources, library books, and other content, we need to ensure that our teachers and our students have that technology so they can learn and that content so they learn. Increasingly, we purchase library books, we purchase content, and we want to make sure that our teachers and students have access to that. We'll provide productivity and communication tools, not only through email and through Google Docs, but also our website, our mass communication systems, our emergency management systems, things like that. We need to ensure that are still functioning, and we'll still have a need for that. And we'll support the technology in the other areas. So of course our importance and where we put a lot of work in is how technology is used in instruction, but it is ubiquitous in what we do. It is used in our air conditioning and our heating systems to monitor that. It's used in our finance, our HR systems to ensure that we have payroll out in time. It's even used tonight in this presentation through video conferencing, through streaming of this board presentation, and through some of the technology that our board used. Technology is ubiquitous, it's not going away, and we'll need to think about how we support that. Next slide. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Board members, do you have any questions?
Can I just ask a clarification? So in the one-to-one program in the middle schools, so you're talking about, so basically this year's sixth graders would continue with their devices in seventh and the new sixth grade. So that's, and eighth grade would still be a bring your own for next year.
That's correct.
Okay.
We are planning on a phase-in approach to the middle school, and so we started this year with sixth grade, and so we've already had conversations with sixth grade teachers and seventh grade teachers about transitioning that seventh grade to a one-to-one. So our plan is our sixth grade students will bring those devices to seventh grade with them and continue on. We are also attending the registration nights at Southview and Valley View to talk with parents about the transition from, and provide them more information about the role of technology in sixth grade. Our plan is to continue with the boot camps that are for parents and students to help provide parents information of how technology is used, the why behind that, but also explain that we're intentional about the use of technology and provide them resources so we can partner on ensuring that the technology is going to be used effectively both in school and at home.
So when do we need to renew this levy? Pretty soon.
That's right, pretty soon. November of next year, or when we certify our levy in December of 2020, will be for the Pay 21 levy, which will cover fiscal year 21-22. And after that, as Steve mentioned, that's when that levy will expire. So we would probably, as a board, want to discuss an election that would probably take place in November of 21 to renew the levy.
So that would coincide with the next school board election, too. Okay.
Correct.
Do you have a question, Owen? Oh, okay, great. Did you have another question?
So I know sometimes we've done levies in referendums in May. Is there, just as you sort of plan this out, I'm pretty sure we did have a May referendum. And so just take a look at the May versus November timeframe. Just kind of, it would give us two cracks at it, so to speak, in case there's any issues.
A question I had for you, Steve, and I don't know if this would be more appropriate for the tech levy plan or the strategic plan, but I would love to see the development of a high-level technology plan, and I know you have elements of it in this and the presentation that you already gave to us, but I'd like to see some goals related to technology for teaching and learning and assessment practices in the schools, and specifically, I would like to see how do we merge technology and special education and teaching and learning together, knowing that we have such a vast, both opportunity but variance in how students utilize technology, and we have everything from students that literally rely on technology to speak, and that's their only means of communication, to students that use their Chromebook, as I would, to some students that do better without technology and do better reading a book as opposed to using a computer. And it would just be interesting to really look at the goals of the levy and the goals that we have in the strategic plan and sort of look at it through a lens of technology and saying if our goal is to whatever it may be from an academic perspective, how do we utilize technology to get all our students there? And whether it's this student needs a whole different set of technology than this student, how do we equip all our students with that? And I would love to, like I said, I don't know if it's a tech levy, a strat plan, something that I'm asking for that is too pie in the sky, but I would love to see something like that.
I think you're starting to articulate what I'm thinking as well. So we have our strategic direction, which has been really helpful and useful, and from that we're doing strategic initiatives in the leadership group. And I think one of the components of that strategic leadership, hopefully, is or initiatives or actions is around technology use. And so I really appreciate you saying that we need to work collaboratively with teaching and learning and special ed, and Jeff Jorgensen and Erin Nelson, I think I saw her in the audience. We work very close with the assistive technology person. She's fantastic, just an incredible asset to the district. We would love to have 4 more of her, so absolutely. And then Randy's department and our department, we actually literally broke down a wall so that we're connected once construction's over with in our area. And so that our plan is to absolutely go back and review the why behind the technology, and to your point about not all technology looks the same for all of our end users is great, and we'll take that into our planning. And so I see two areas of focus: ensuring that we have technology that's up to date within our standards of reasonable technology that we want to keep up to date. That's the making sure that it works. But I think more importantly is technology and equipping our teachers with the technology. That's that piece. But when our teachers use that tool out of their toolbox, it's because it is the best tool for them to be using at that time. And so that gets to your point about making sure that we're working very closely with teaching and learning, assessment, with special education, to ensure that we've articulated what that looks like and that feels like at grade level or content area, or for our ML students or our students with special education. That's going to be the foundation, I think, of what that technology is going to look like. For how much is there going to be any change in what we need to purchase, or is there any reallocation of those dollars? And then that would hopefully form the foundation of any future tech levy that we'd have. So I think we're right on the same thinking in that area.
Thank you, Steve. Anything else?
I do.
No? Great.
I do.
Oh,
I have
I'm
one
sorry,
quick
Julie.
No, that's okay. I just have a quick question. When you're talking about, how with the consistency of the Chromebooks coming into the 6th grade, have you seen any cost savings from a support standpoint? I know that, and I don't know if if we can even capture that data, but I'm just curious if that consistency has helped to just focus the efforts in terms of support instead of everyone having, a lot of different types of computers and Macs and not being able to. I just didn't know if we're seeing any cost savings on that, or maybe there's no influence, I don't know.
I don't think we've seen a cost savings on the repair. We still have repair devices, and Chromebooks are a device that in our technology department we love, but we also hate. I mean, they're very inexpensive devices, and so they're very inexpensive, and so they sometimes tend to break down, or they'll have manufacturer defects that we'll quickly fix. I think where we're seeing benefit is working with our teachers on this idea of intentionality, and then also being able to monitor screen time and filtering. So we're becoming, we continue to partner with our parents to ensure that our students are making healthy choices around technology. And so having the Chromebooks allows us to have a standard set of filtering rules, both in school and at home, and partner with our parents to make sure that those choices are being practiced at school, but reinforced at home, and supporting our parents in that journey.
Great, thank you.
Great. I think that's all. Thank
No,
you.
actually, could you just talk for just a little bit about staffing and PD is taking a little bit more of the budget? Does that seem to be leveling off, or do you see more of that happening? And is it rising because there's more technical penetration in all areas of the district?
Well, I think it's a combination of a number of those factors. I would say this is that I've been here for a couple of years now in the Edina Public Schools, and it has become more and more prevalent technology in every area that we work with. And so there is no area in the operations that isn't technology isn't pervasive. Literally, I was working with Eric Hamilton and Kurt Johansson around the HVAC system, and that system is completely managed with computers and Internet of Things. And so we've gone from having 3,000 things on our network to having 15 to 25,000 things on our network on a daily basis, and it's touching more of our staff. So what we've done, and I think it's right for us to do, is when we look at what do we prioritize in this organization, specifically around budget cut times, we talk about what do we prioritize, people and human interaction, or things and technology devices. And so when we look at that, we look at the technology levy as an opportunity for us to say, hey, if we have staff members and increasingly doing more and more technology, part of their position is related to technology, and so that's one of this opportunity where we start looking at, is it make better sense to have that portion of their position out of the tech levy? And so when I say we have an increase, what we're doing is we're coding those staff people that are doing technology support, technology management into the technology levy, and that's where we're seeing the increase.
Okay, thanks.
Now are we done? No. Great. Thank you, Steve and John.
Thank you.
Next, we have Community Education Program and Budget, presented by Val Burke. Welcome, Val.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you, school board members, Superintendent Schultz, and colleagues and community members. Tonight, we're going to be reviewing our Community Education Services budget. We'll begin by reviewing who we are and what we believe, and we'll move into talking about our audited numbers for 2018-19, how they closed out. We'll talk a little bit about a mid-year review for this year, and then really spend the majority of our time looking forward to how we built and who's involved with our 2021 budget building. Next slide, please. It's a little powerful, isn't it? So community education is built on a philosophy of citizen and community engagement. And when we think at the highest level, we have this vision of co-creating a community of learners where all participate and all belong. We base that on 6 values. that we have here: equitable access for all, teamwork and collaboration, maximizing our resources, high-quality customer service always, leveraging data for continuous improvement, and partnerships and engagement. We currently have 85 full-time staff and 215 part-time staff that all support the values of our work. Next slide. This is who we are. We truly do serve early learners, youth, adolescents, adults, and the community at large through the programs and services we provide and manage. And this wide array of program opportunities are part of an $8 million enterprise that is constantly balancing a mix of revenue-generating, non-revenue-generating, and cost-neutral programs. The opportunities that we provide reflect the needs and wants of our community and reflects our staff, our students, our parents, our adult learners, the community at large, and our advisory councils, and of course you, our school board. Our journey for the last 7 years kind of gives you an idea of how the outside environment and our school environment can reflect both the delivery of our programs and our financial outcomes. Next slide. Oops. Can you do the next slide, please? Sorry, we changed this. It's nothing different in the presentation, just a review of how the slides go. But I want to talk a little bit first about how our revenue streams come in 3 main pots. Primarily, we have 13% of our revenue comes from community levies. We're extremely fortunate in Minnesota to have community support. About 6% of our revenues come in from state and federal aid. Those primarily support our restricted funds, which are in early learning, and our adult basic education. But by and large, we are supported by fees, about 80% with a couple percent in some outside grants. Being primarily fee-based, our goal is to keep a pretty robust fund balance. We do this in order to be able to maintain our programs and services during economic downshifts, district program changes, and external trends that may impact our program revenues. Okay, back to the other one, please. Thank you. So let's look at our audited budgeted numbers for 18-19. We landed in a healthy place with our revenues exceeding our expenses by about $192,000. What's remarkable about that for this year was this was the first year of our school start time changes, and during that year, we in Community Ed hired 2 new program coordinators. So collectively, we were building a new team, delivering new programs, and it was sort of a blind year. So we were pleased to be able to land the year in a healthy level. Next slide. Over 20,000 community members, ranging from infants through adults, were served through community education in 2018-19. For 2019-20, we began very creatively. As a leadership team, we redesigned our pre-K through adult learning staff to reflect the program changes that have occurred and to better listen and meet the needs of our community. At this point, we don't have audited numbers, but we are looking fairly solid as we move into 2021 budget planning. This is a very unique confluence of time for us because you are looking back, you're living in the present, and you're looking ahead planning. Next slide. How do we do our process and how do we determine our budget priorities? We begin in September and October meeting as a leadership team to talk about where we're at and where we want to be. We work with our advisory council to talk about our budget, what our priorities are, and have a dialogue with them. And then at this point in the year, we bring our priorities forward to you, the school board, and then we'll continue to take dialogue and tweak until we do the final budget in May. Our budget priorities are built on 3 values this year: high-quality customer service, teamwork and collaboration, and maximizing our resources. Financially, the focus areas for us are creating a smooth transition as Community Ed moves to the third floor. In our first floor entrance inside door 3, we want to make sure that we are creating an environment where our community members and our users feel welcomed and feel excited about the new improved community center. We also have allocated budget dollars. We will be successfully completing, we hope, 3 CES employee guidebooks this year. We have one for our coordinator staff, one for our supervisors and managers, and one for our hourly employees. So partnering with HR, we're in the just beginning stages of that, and we should have those ready to go by July 1st. And then finally, we're allocating dollars to identify a partner with us to create a awareness plan to build with our community and for our community and to reintroduce our community to the programs and services that we offer. So we will be working with outside folks and our communication department to really renew energy and excitement out in our community about Community Ed. Next. I wasn't sure how hard that would be to read. It's a little hard, but it is in the board packet as well. It gives you the view of 2018 and how it landed, where we're sitting right now in 2014 and what our projected budget was, and then looking ahead to 2020 and 21. I want to thank our friends in the business office because this is the year that we have decided that it was time to build our budget from the ground up, code by code, because as we've discussed, many of the programs and services changed, and the staff has changed. So rather than relying on, let's take a budget and go 3% up, we just stripped it down to the beginning to kind of build up from there. I'm going to be honest, this is a first swag at a 2021. In Community Ed, we very often do a budget change in October because we have more information about how our summer programming has done and how the year has landed. But looking ahead, and with the new budget that we've put together, as well as the budget tools through eFinance, we have the ability now to look at real-time data and real-time expenses. And so this allows us to be nimble with our program adaptations and program choices. It also gives us the ability to partner more robustly with our colleagues internally and with our community partners. So our bottom line for 2021 at this point looks like it will be healthy with revenue exceeding expenses. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, what gets us excited programmatically and partnership-wise? The redesign of our pre-K through adult enrichment program will enable us to expand our pre-K enrichment options, which we're very delighted to do. It also, our community involvement and engagement team has taken a really robust look at our offerings for all of our 6th through 12th graders, and we're excited to partner with many of the staff in our middle school and in our high school to offer some career, life, and college-ready options, as well as a full robust of Spark options, we would call them. And then we'd also like you to mark 10-10-20 on your calendars, where we will debut our 4th annual TEDx Edina event. This is an event where we engage multiple community partners and volunteers to help plan and execute an event that serves over 400 of our residents and in surrounding areas. So I'll finish with the thank you for the continued support of the board for Community Ed, the Department of Community Ed, and I'll be quiet and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Val. Does the board have any questions or comments?
I have one question, Val.
Sure.
When I'm looking at this, I notice in the 1920 versus the projected 2021, that for ECFE, it looks like it's about $100,000 less. Is that due to less ECFE programming year over year? Or what is that? I wasn't sure if that was just looking ahead to programming and if, were there going to be some less ECFE classes?
Okay, so tell me where,
If
no.
I'm reading this correctly, in the red where it says ECFE, home visiting, is that for our traditional ECFE classes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then I just noticed there was a drop. I was curious about that.
We have been slowly but surely expanding some of our pre-K and preschool options for families. We still have a very robust 0 to 3 parent education, and then Leah and her team have been offering parent education in a really expanded way to families without being attached to a class. So I guess to answer your question, there may be. We've also had to do some splitting between non-ECFE and ECFE budgets that would account for a little of that.
A couple thoughts I have. First off, I'm glad that you pointed out that fees cover 79% of the budget, which is exciting that it is largely self-funding. The second thing is, I've got a question for you on page 6, the second to last page. In the fall of 2020, we will relocate to the 3rd floor of ECC. The move will enable our tenants and nonprofits. Would you spell out who the tenants are? Do we gain revenue from them? How does that?
The Edina Credit Union lives here in the community center, so that will be moved downstairs, so it's outward facing to our public. We also host Edina Give and Go and the Edina Ed Fund on the 3rd floor, and they will be down there. We'll pair them with our Edina Resource Center, and they do a lot of partnership work together. And then our early childhood special ed, our early childhood preschool screening will be down in the current space that we are in right now.
Are they revenue neutral or part of the budget?
Yes, they are. We do receive fees from tenants, and so they are either a cost benefit to us or revenue neutral.
Okay. I want to compliment you on these documents. I thought they're very thorough and answered a lot of questions that I didn't even know I had, so
Good.
thank you. And I support you so much in all the readiness programs, because that's just right in alignment with our strategic plan, getting our kids ready for kindergarten and then meeting the families along the way. And as a dad who went through ECFE for 6 years, I gained so much from it. So it's such a valuable service to the community.
Good, thank you, Owen. Anyone else? Thank you, Val. You are welcome. Thanks for the
Your time and
opportunity.
your presentation. Next up are...
Thanks, Val.
Next up, our Student Support Services Program and Budget with Jeff Jorgensen. And thank you to all the community members and staff members that have stayed to watch this presentation. Welcome, Jeff.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Schwartz. Sorry. And a welcome to special education parents in the room, SEEK members in the room, and special education teachers, and I think our students now left, but I don't know if you noticed, I'm kind of an emotional guy. I was welling up over there when I saw the students get up and give the testimony that they did. And thank you so much for the fathers and the mothers that testified tonight and came up and talked about our needs in special education. So I thank you all very much for being here tonight. I'm here to give you just an overview of the special education program and finance. And I'd like to start off with a slide because, when we talk about mission and we talk about purpose in special education, it really boils down to how we're driven by the state and federal government. And I like to revisit that because it's the mandate that drives our services. And within that mandate is some pretty compelling information. And so back when IDEA was originally developed back in the 1970s, it talked about specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. Children who receive special education and related services are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. Second two bullets there are, this includes opportunities to participate in the school's general curriculum. I'm going to come back to that because that comes back to our inclusive nature. And then children who receive special education must also have opportunities to take part in typical school activities that are appropriate to their individual needs. That means it's beyond the school day. We need to be taking a look at those opportunities beyond the school day and the classroom environment. Next slide, please. So our special education enrollment is currently at 1,118 students, and that changes nearly on a daily basis. Controlling for early childhood special education, this accounts for 12% of the K-12 population right now. And that is up from where we have seen it in the past. Our greatest growth is being seen in early childhood, as can be expected, because we just keep having kids and we keep identifying kids that are in need. And that's okay, because the earlier we catch them, the better. We're also seeing tremendous growth at our elementary levels. Programmatically, we're seeing the highest increases in speech and language, and I talked to the board a little bit about that last Thursday when I presented site-based programming. Students that require programming for a good percentage of the day is also growing at a rate that is hard to keep up with, because it's not only just about teachers, it's also about space and about buildings and where can we house those programs. We have stronger trends towards inclusion in our schools, and that is an attractive portion to people that are looking at our district. Significant resources are devoted towards dysregulated students in the classroom, and that was part of my SEL presentation as well, our social emotional learning presentation on Thursday. And then our mental health concerns continue to grow at lower and lower levels, or early and early childhood levels. Next slide, please. So this is our growth trend within Edina Public Schools, and what I'll show you there is that those bars are just in order from 16-17 in the blue all the way over to the green 19-20, and 19-20 is not done yet, and I want to emphasize that is that those numbers are changing. I think I said in the board report that I currently have somewhere around 50 students that are currently in initial evaluation, and we have about an 85% hit rate on those evaluations. So those numbers are going to continue to rise, and those are happening at all levels, middle school, high school, elementaries, and in early childhood. What you'll notice is that our non-public population has grown tremendously over the past couple of years, and we continue to see that rise. That increases on a yearly basis, and that is additional staff that we have to hire to service those non-public students that we do gain revenue for, but it's only shared time revenue that we're receiving from the parochial schools. Southview Middle School and Valley View are increasing from the numbers that initially went down when the 9th grade transitioned up to the high school, but now we're seeing those numbers climb right back up to that pre-transition level. Next year, we will experience the highest level of special education students that we've seen within the last 5 years, counting when they had the 9th grade in attendance at the middle schools. We have a large 5th grade population of special education students coming through the system right now, and they will go to middle school next year. Edina High School is remaining high, and then we've also got Concord, Cornelia, Countryside, all increasing in their numbers. Highland Elementary School is seeing some of the greatest growth in special education students, and I will point them out as having a population of 20% of their students right now are identified as special education at Highlands Elementary School, which obviously increases our overall district percentages. Next slide, please.
Jeff, this is Matt. Could you repeat that last number? Did you say 20% of Highlands Elementary students?
20% of the enrolled population at Highlands currently is identified with some form of special education need. A good percentage of that is speech and language concerns, but then we also do have the full gamut of disabilities that are in attendance at Highlands Elementary School.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So reflecting on the board's strategic priorities, I actually really loved the 5 strategic priorities that you landed on, because every one of them has deep roots into our special education concerns. Next slide, please. When we take a look at advancing academics, obviously this is something that is important to special education just as it is for our high academic learners. And as we work through, and we're already addressing some of these issues, trying to improve our instructional practices. These are some of the elements that we're utilizing right now with Hill Rep, Sonday, and then our social emotional learning strategies. We're working to ever improve our early intervention strategies, those strategies that'll get to students sooner and hopefully keep some students from needing our services in special education. And then we've worked very hard this year on communication and collaboration. In part, it is driven by the corrective action planning that we discovered we needed to do from the Department of Education. As regular education teachers just said they wanted to know more about how to serve kids effectively within the classroom. And so that's been a great deal of our work this year, has been trying to improve those communication practices. This leads to a layering of supports as opposed to separate and distinct services when we can collaborate effectively. Next slide, please. So what you see here is a triangle, and the triangle that, the pyramid that we typically look at is straight on, and you see that green zone with all students, you see the yellow zone with students that are in intervention, and then you see the red zone that is a zone where students are served more on one-to-one and very specialized training. But I really like this slide so much better, and I'll tell you why. It is a layering or a stacking of services. It's not an either-or. It's not that you're getting everything in the mainstream or you're getting intervention or you're getting special education. Rather, students that are in the highest level of need get more services than other students do, and students in lesser need will get less service, but will get an exemplary education experience at the same time. So we want to level those services, and in that leveling is where we see the best inclusion efforts taking place. Next slide, please. So this is my favorite, and I had to take the time to write this out because Chris Moquist actually spoke to this a little bit earlier when he talked about equity and inclusion. Enhance climate equity and inclusion. This strategic activity, a PPS will welcome, respect, support, and value everyone so students can learn effectively, develop deeper understanding of complex issues, and become empowered to contribute to the school and community. I wish I could have had the girls come up from the middle school at this point in the presentation because that's what they spoke to tonight. This single priority strategy encompasses a primary objective of the Special Education Advisory Council and our program as a whole. A primary guiding factor in the delivery of special education services is that they are to be delivered in the least restrictive environment possible for growth to take place. While the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act originally listed consideration of the least restrictive environment as a process requirement, it more deeply demonstrates a hope that one day we will develop effective, inclusive practices that allow all students to thrive. Next slide, please. So, inclusive models such as unified sports, Aspire program, Theater for All, and multiple practices that are going on in our elementary schools, early childhood, which is an inclusion-based model, are a glimpse, give us a glimpse into a possible future across our district, a future in which the unified experience benefits everyone. I'm going to take some time here. We put together a video with the assistance of Chris Moquist just to talk about our Theater for All programming.
Many students register for this class and they didn't know what it was. They didn't know it was unified theater. They think it's just a regular theater class. And they want to quit. Some of them want to quit the very first day. Some of them want to quit a couple weeks in, but we have never had a student quit.
Every semester, we always have kids that come up to us and they're like, yep, not for me, dropping the class.
But by the end of the class, all of the kids say, I'm so glad I didn't quit. I learned so much about myself. It was the best experience that I ever had.
Almost always, those are the kids that grow the most from it. And it is the class that they feel the most successful in. They're the kids that are seeking community that they don't have within the building. They're the students that aren't connected. They're not connected in different activities. They're kids that go to classes that they don't have friends in the class, that they don't have somebody that they sit with at lunch, or they have students that they sit with at lunch that are also not into school. That, you know, they're kids that don't come to school on a regular basis. Those are the kids that you're just like, it's amazing that you stuck it out and that now you found a purpose, and now you're coming to school when that wasn't something you were doing on a regular basis, and you really want to be here. But they, they're kids that's what they need. They need a reason to come to school. They need something that they're successful at, that they feel proud in, and then they're the kids that go off and they're, after school that they're like, yep, I, changed my mind, I'm gonna be a special ed teacher, or, now I'm looking for, I'm gonna be a PCA. They find purpose in something that they never thought that they would do. So, and the number of students that we have that graduate from the high school that have gone through our unified programming, that go into college and go into post-secondary things that are related to special education, our numbers are crazy, especially considering that overall those numbers are decreasing nationally. Our numbers increase substantially.
Our guiding principle is that we're showcasing abilities, that we're not putting disabilities on display, we're showcasing abilities. And I think that guides every choice that Lisa and I make when we're deciding on casting, when we're deciding what set pieces should we use. And we talk to the partners about that as well, the students who are partners. You need to find out what your partner can do. We're not focused on what they can't do. What can they do? And let's focus on that. So that guides everything. Because the arts are transformative, and kids, every human being deserves the opportunity to be in the arts, because that's what the arts are. The arts are finding your voice and expressing yourself. And by voice, I don't necessarily mean vocal voice, because we have lots of students who are nonverbal. But how do you communicate? What is your communicative voice? And just watching the interaction between the students together, the partners working together, it's so phenomenal to see young people let themselves be that vulnerable and let themselves be that human with each other. It's remarkable. It really is to see how compassionate they are with each other. And then also to see students who have never been given an opportunity to let their voices be heard and to tell their own story and to participate in any artistic endeavor, to see their eyes light up, to see their faces shine is phenomenal. And then that first night of the first performance that we did, to see the parents' response, and as a parent myself, it filled me with joy but sorrow, because I thought I've had all these opportunities to see my child shine in front of other people, and I just thought these parents who have never been able to see their child in that light. And it was really remarkable too to have parents come up to me and say, I didn't know my daughter could do that. I didn't know my son could do that.
Tonight's magic began, touching me draped against the wall. Suddenly standing there, a beautiful stranger, tall and rare. Let it stop for chocolate in my gaze. Well, I can talk all evening, which is totally bizarre. Nothing like the life I've led so far. For the first time in forever, music will be fine. For the first time in forever, you'll be noticed by someone. And I know it is totally crazy to dream like find romance for the first time in forever. At least I got a chance.
It was very impactful for her, because it not only helped her build her theater skills and how do you deal with a partner that needs you maybe a little bit more than another gen ed student would. It also made her think beyond herself about what theater means to people and how far people can actually go. The thing that was really impactful for me as a parent is that my daughters lived without a doubt, a very privileged life. And to watch her lend her skills as an actor, her skills as a leader, her skills as a caring person, to this group who'd been completely shut out of anything that she'd experienced in the last 15 years was a really beautiful thing, a really, really beautiful thing.
This experience for them, they got to experience what it is like to be unified, that, you know what I mean, that you are working with students with disabilities and students without disabilities, and what it is to be unified, and then they get to carry that forward. They get to, you know, go on to college and pull from that knowledge base, get to go out and be productive adults and know that this class taught them that unified is not just a theater class, but it's how you should live your life. Like, you should look at it that it's that we should be inclusive, and that being unified is a way of life. And I really think that it makes them better people, better human beings, and that they can share that with other people out in the future. And I really think that's what they learned the most about this, is that they could be unified, and that's a way of life.
You underestimate what these kids are capable of, and even the adults are capable of, and what they want to aspire to. Just because they aren't vocal about it doesn't mean they don't want to get up and run. I think those kids, all of them, the gen ed students, special ed students, come out with a greater understanding of the craft and more confidence in themselves, and probably more awareness of just kindness and being how to exist in a community where not everyone comes from the same level of privilege that you do.
I think that the whole unified is a movement that is really starting to take off. So this program embodies what that looks like. That, like I said, it's unified across the spectrum. It's theater kids, non-theater kids, kids with disabilities, kids without disabilities. And what I think this program shows, that unified is where we're going, and that that anybody can do it, and that it is so positive in a school. And it's so great to see that in theater and outside of theater, that these kids are genuinely friends and they genuinely care about each other. And it gives them the opportunity where before there wasn't an opportunity, like, how do you get involved in these programs? And this program really does allow kids to come, have a safe space, and to really feel like they're a part of something big. So.
Thanks again to Chris Moquist who put that together and organized those interviews. And I will point out that the young lady singing in the video clip is Ailey Moquist, and Chris was one of those parents that had no idea his daughter had that kind of voice. And it was dark in the theater, but I'm pretty sure I saw tears hitting the floor. But that being said, I also wanted to point out the song that she was singing. I don't know if you heard the lyrics, but the lyrics were very impactful if you think about the Theater for All. And one of the phrases in there, for the first time in forever, at least I got a chance. That's, all of our kids deserve a chance. Our next strategic objective was to foster the positive learning environments and whole student learning. And special education, Student Support Services, is taking the lead on this with our SEL programming, with Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 types of interventions going on. We're still early in those stages for Tier 1, but we're very hopeful that we're going to get some really great get some great information out of that and be able to move forward on that next year. Next slide, please. Developing leadership throughout the schools. We're already seeing some of the leadership that is taking place at our schools, especially at the student level. When we give people opportunities to interact with one another, we all grow. Special education students taking the leadership roles. It is regular education students taking leadership roles and stepping out of where they're at. We're also continuing to work with our building administration and trying to allow our special education teachers, who are the true brilliance in this model, to be celebrated, to demonstrate their brilliance in everything that they do by sharing out their insights. And what we're seeing this year with the communication practices is that as our special education teachers are able to communicate more with our regular education teachers, a true level of respect has risen within our regular education population to see what our staff do, what they know, and what we can accomplish together. Next slide, please. So engaging parents, schools, and community, this is where I will do the biggest shout out ever. The Student Support Services Department maintains an outstanding relationship with our Special Education Advisory Council. When I came into this district 6 years back now, it was almost dead, but thanks to Sue Sullivan back here and a few other true people that were true believers in getting that accomplished, we now have representation at every single one of our sites. As a matter of fact, we have people competing for sites to sit in on that advisory. It is an active advisory, and we have a great relationship with them, and they are the ones that organized everything that took place beforehand here tonight. So thank you all very much. I see Amy Mastel is our chair, sitting right back there. Next slide, please. Special education finance, this is the tougher part of the conversation when we talk about special education finance. We talk about how special education is funded by the braiding of specific resources. We get state funding, which amounts to about 62% of the total cost of special education expenditures. But with that, we've had a cap on yearly growth of 4%. And then we've had to experience some budget cuts over the past 4 years that really brought us back down to more of a maintenance of effort. Federal special education aid is only about 10%, if that, of our total cost. It's actually a lot less, I think, than 10% in our district, and that's a diminishing funding source. Even though our child count is going up and we should see an increase in the amount of federal funds, we're not seeing it under the current administration. We also have tuition billing, which is students coming in from the outside, and they're bringing in funding with them when they come with, but currently is a part of state special education. It is currently part of the state special education growth factor or growth cap. And so it doesn't make any difference how many students were coming in, it would still be capped at a 4% growth rate per year. Now our current governor is working on that. So the last part is the general education cross-subsidy aid, and that is where the district comes in to provide the remainder of the unreimbursed portion of the provision of special education services. And I think our last numbers sits between $7 or $8 million is what our cross-subsidy is in special education. So that's the unfunded cost of special education services. Next slide, please. This is just an example of the funding gap. I love this slide because it really does show what we struggle with when we try to fund special education services. The federal government has fallen way short in their application. They were supposed to close that gap. They were supposed to pay for up to 40% of the total cost of special education. Never even come close. As a matter of fact, the highest point they reached was back in about 2010, where they reached a high of 16.6%. of the total cost of special education. As you can see, what we're projecting for 2021 is about 63.4%, so the state is increasing our costs a little bit in terms of the reimbursement, but it still does not keep up with our inflationary factors. The federal is barely worth mentioning down at the bottom, and then that black line up at the top, or the black dotted line up at the top is the amount that we're getting for full reimbursement, so the remainder of our costs is all on our cross-subsidy. Next slide, please. Now, there is some hope on the horizon, and the hope on the horizon here is that the Senate, the House, and the governor came together. They did some good work in the educational finance bill. They flowed out some cross-subsidy aid to us to cap our cross-subsidy at the current level from last year, and that aid will assist us in getting through the current year as then we move into the next year. I believe there's still cross-subsidy aid next year, John? Yeah, so next year is also cross-subsidy aid, which again will keep us at a cap. And then the third year, they're removing the cap from special education growth, which is a big success story. So as we're growing now, we're going to be able to see more revenue coming in because they won't cap us at a certain amount. So that is really great. Next slide, please. And then we've got open enrollment. Open enrollment is something that I do like to talk about in a very positive sense. 22% of our total K-12 special education enrollment is currently open enrolled to us. And that's in comparison to our district-wide open enrollment rate of 16.6% when counting all students regardless of a special education status. The reason that this is important is that it's demonstrating that not only are we getting students into us with that 22% that are taking a look on the outside and saying Edina has something special going on, but we're also keeping our special education students, as I'll show here in just a minute, with just our trends in open enrollment and what that's meaning for our tuition deficit that we've had in our district for a very long time period. A shout out to the Aspire program. I just received a call on them today from Connecticut, where someone was reading an article about the Aspire program at Southview, and they said, we'd like to talk to somebody that created that program because you're doing something right. And it's not infrequent that I get those kind of calls on our special education programming when these programs are getting the national attention that they so deserve. Next slide, please. So here's our opportunities with open enrollment, and I do want to say opportunities, but also challenges that come with them. We get an increased ADM, average daily membership. Here is our trend that we're seeing in our decreasing tuition deficit. And tuition deficit is just taking the amount of students that are coming into the program versus the amount of students that are going outside of the system, and then calculating the cost of that service. Now, Edina has traditionally had a tuition deficit that has been very large, and this is about around tuition billing deficit now for special education. And actually, if I went back even further than that, it actually started off, I believe, in fiscal year 16 or fiscal year 16 at $1.3 million is the tuition deficit. And as you can see, a steady trend downwards. That means our special education families are choosing to stay with us, but it also means that students are coming into us from the metropolitan area around us, which is good news for us in keeping our ADM and keeping those dollars flowing now that the cap will be released, because all that will be dollars that will come back into us as a district. It demonstrates confidence in the special education program. The biggest challenge with this are things that we experience in trying to plan for next year. Because planning for next year becomes very difficult with open enrollment because we're not always sure of the enrollment status of the student or whether or not they're identified as special needs. And some of our students may have significant special needs, and we will move to meet those needs coming in. But some of those needs are very hard to plan for unless we are really understanding the needs of the student way ahead of time. For an example, this year we had to create a whole nother program at Creek Valley Elementary School because we had students that were either late to enroll to the district, just moved in, or moved into the district from an open enrollment clause. And as a result of that, those are students that need services all day long. And it's not just adding a teacher, that's adding speech time, that's adding occupational therapy time, adaptive phy-ed time. So those are hard things to do, but I did check with our neighboring districts just to see whether or not they're experiencing the same kind of mobility, same kind of movement, same kind of increases in child count. All of them are expressing a slight increase in child count. A few of the schools, very few of the schools, were identifying a large number of students that are open enrolling. And so most of them are experiencing those increases in their special education population through identification of new students. And they are seeing the same trend, which is more and more speech and language students and more SLD students, or specific learning disability students. That is once again on the rise. So next slide, please. So programmatically, we asked the board to remain engaged in our efforts to serve our special education students thoughtfully, responsibly, and effectively. Fiscally, we're going to ask the board to be understanding of our growing special education population and the need for expanding services to meet those needs. One of the things that, John talked to me about setting up, some additional dollars for special education this year, and I said it's really a hard thing to gauge, John, in terms of what it is we're going to need, because my budget in a year can vacillate $400,000 to $500,000 in relationship to who enrolls with us in the fall. And so I just ask for that understanding that we are compelled to serve. And that the vast majority of students that are coming into us through open enrollment bring with them the revenue of other districts, and the districts pay for a substantial portion of the excess cost of special education aid that goes there. So we will build better programming through the open enrollment process for our students. Last slide, please. So here's where we're inviting the board to hold us accountable We want you to hold special education accountable as we work towards better practices, as we work towards expanding effective inclusion practices for our students, as we work towards improving collaboration with our educational partners across the district, as we work on implementing evidence-based, high-impact instructional strategies for all of our students, as we work on improving our efficiency and workflow to maximize student service time. But as you hold us accountable, we also ask you to hold us up, just as we hold our students up. As we try new things and sometimes fail, as we take risks and sometimes fall, as we persevere in the face of adversity to meet the needs of those we serve. I thank you all for just being willing to engage in the conversation. And I know that the parents of this district are very fortunate to have you on as board members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for coming and presenting that and creating the video. Thank you, Chris, for doing that. Do you guys have any questions for Jeff or no? I quick wanted to just thank the special education parents that came here tonight and spoke. I've been a part of this SEEK for I think 2 years now, and it's been brought up, how can we elevate special education needs? And a lot of times it's been brought up that the energy it takes to raise a child, with special needs is all encompassing. And it's all all you can do to raise that child. And to take the extra energy to come and advocate for that child is a lot more sometimes than you can do. So I just wanted to thank you for coming tonight. It really means a lot. And I just wanted to say that it's incumbent upon us as board members to do our due diligence, that we understand the needs of special education students, so you don't feel like you have to come here to advocate for your students. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and acknowledge you for coming. And before you leave, Jeff, it's a little bit out of protocol, but we got an email about you that I would like to read to you while you're on the spot in the middle of the boardroom. Dear EPS School Board, it is long overdue, but we wanted to recognize Jeff Jorgensen and his leadership of the Special Services Department at Edina Public Schools. When Jeff arrived, special services at the district had largely been focused on the mechanics of special education, reporting requirements, paperwork, and due process. All of those things are necessary, but Jeff helped shift that focus to where it belongs, to our kids. He has made sure that everything starts with and is focused on what is best for students. What can Edina Public Schools do to help these students learn and grow to reach their fullest potential? Since he arrived at EPS, he has been a tireless advocate for these amazing kids, for their parents, and for the vital special education staff members and incredible dedicated teachers across our district. When budget cuts had to be made, Jeff made some very difficult decisions and took pains to keep those cuts as far away from students and parents as possible, even though it increased his personal workload and responsibilities. His goal was to minimize, to the best of his ability, the impact those reductions would have on the daily lives of students and parents. The programs for special education students that have been developed, encouraged, highlighted, and grown over the past few years have been amazing all across our district. Truly unified educational programming is taking hold across all levels and areas, from early childhood all the way through the high school. We have a fantastic growing relationship with Special Olympics, and Edina staff-created programs like Peer Insights, Theater for All, and Artwork Studios are serving as models for other schools across our state and across the nation. Jeff and his team have been open and receptive to parents' feedback. He understands our message of inclusion and believes strongly in access to an education that meets the needs of the individual. We so appreciate and want to recognize Jeff for everything he and his entire team across our district do to support us. Jeff and the Special Services Department are the advocates, the champions, the fighters, the supporters, the encouragers who help make our lives easier and better, by making things easier and better for our kids and their education. They help our students learn, grow, thrive, and strive to reach their fullest potential at Edina Public Schools. So on behalf of all of us on SEEK, thank you. It's not enough, and it is long overdue, but please know that we truly appreciate you. With deep admiration and appreciation, members of the Special Education Advisory Council, Edina Public Schools.
I will say, this is about our teachers and the work that they do, and it's about the families that are willing to work with us. I have never been so blessed as to work with such a wonderful group of parents in this district as I have been in Edina Public Schools, and I am blessed to work with the teachers that we have that bring their brilliance to us every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Finally, up for discussion is the policy review led by Owen Michelson, the chair of the policy committee.
Thank you, Erica. And that is a hard act to follow.
Yes, it is.
And Jeff, and you special ed teachers and parents, thank you very much for coming. Very meaningful, very touching for all of us, and I think we're so behind you. Well, policy is prosaic, but necessary to talk about. And since I've become the policy chair, I wanted to give a brief Policy 101 to the community because I was mystified by it when I first became aware of the school board. And that is, as a school board, we are governed by state statute, and it is spare but explicit. And one of the areas that is outlined that we are to cover is set and manage the policy of the district. And to that end, we have one of our four standing committees being the policy committee. And it is our charge to review 4 sets of policies every month. And those policies are those that may be affected by the strategic plan, which may be coming to us now. If any one of the 7 of us choose to bring a policy up before the committee, if we, I forgot to say this, third thing, if we have an annual review of about a dozen policies that are mandated to us by the state that we have to go through every single year. And then we also, as a body, have elected to go through all of our policies and review them every 3-4 years. And the policies are grouped into 9 different series. We have 171 series. Thank you for looking that up for me, Sarah, today. 171 policies, and they're grouped in 9 series. I'll just quickly give the community an overview of what they are. The school district, that's the 100 series. The 200 series is the school board. 300 is the administration. 400 is personnel. 500 is students. 600 is educational programs. 700 is non-instructional operations and business services. 800 is buildings and sites, and 900 is community relations. All of these are searchable on the web, on our website. Very good search engine. And it is our commission this year to go through the 500 and the 600 series, the student and educational program series. And I am doing this in partnership with Brian Bass. And Brian did us a big favor by looking at the 500 and 600 series that we need to evaluate this year and compared them against our model language, that sort of our plumb line, and it's MSBA, the Minnesota School Boards Association, and he looked to see if there are any language changes. And if there are no language changes, then we're doing something new this year on the board, and that is we're putting those onto our consent agreement on the board on our agenda. So that's different from last year. Some people have noticed that. And what we on policy do is we're committed to reading those, and if we have any objection to it, then we'll take it out of our consent agenda and talk about it. So Brian has saved us quite a bit of time by doing that. And that's why we had a deviation this board meeting will continue to do that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about what the board's about, or what the policy committee's about. And it so happens that today we have 2 policies up for discussion. And what we do is we have this, policies on discussion 1 month, and the following month we'll vote on them. And so the 2 policies for discussion today are policy 536 and policy 628. 536 is dealing with communicable diseases. And the recommendation from our school nurse is to actually rescind this, because it is unnecessary, because we already have that in policy, and state statute in another way governs this. So I can open this up for discussion then, and then we can move on to our next policy.
The only comment, I support the recommendation of our professionals, and that it's unnecessary to have the policy, that we're dictated by the state, and that it's unnecessary to have this.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I believe the policy that we're rescinding, that was put in place in like 2012 was the last time it was reviewed. Just to give some perspective, it's been 7 years. So yes, I agree with the recommendation.
Okay, so we'll move forward that way. Then the next policy is policy 628. This is the exceptional athlete policy. This was brought to our attention by a concerned parent who presented to us, I think it was in September, and was concerned that his son was being passed over for play on the varsity soccer team. We took this very seriously and brought it before the policy committee 3 times. And just last week, we invited Troy Stein, the athletic director of EHS, to come and address us and talk about it. And Troy, are you ready to talk at all? He's way back, and
I can be, yes.
thank you. We'd appreciate your insight into this.
Good evening, Board Chair Ellenberg, Superintendent Schultz. How can I help you with, so there's no recommendation change outside of some slight language in the appendix, which I think we talked about at the policy level would be good, but how can I help answer any questions?
So in essence, you are recommending that in substance we continue on with what we've been doing. And the concern was that there were athletes who were being passed over, and they had been playing, in this instance, soccer for years, and then come the junior year of this athlete, he was a pretty good player, but he was displaced by an 8th grader or a 9th grader. And what you said in the policy committee was that there really is no displacement, that all athletes will still be retained on the team, but we still have room for the exceptional 8th or 9th grade athlete. And so could you elaborate on that?
So I'll go back to the start of the policy change. So in the 2015-16 school year, the policy longstanding up to that point had been that in order to be considered exceptional, you had to make the varsity level and be a significant contributor. One of the challenges that coaches faced and the student athlete faced was that's a big leap from a 7th and 8th grader who is exceptional at that level, and make that adjustment both socially, emotionally, and then physically as well. So at the time, we had some coaches that made a recommendation. They wanted that transition to be a little smoother, in which they called an exceptional athlete could jump to the high school level, so the B squad, JV, or varsity level. And then the thought process was this student athlete would be at the varsity level by the end of that year or the next year. Obviously, no guarantees. Also in the policy, we talked about having the ability for the athletic director and the coach to determine which programs would fit under that classification of exceptional. So, for example, some of our programs, we state right from the beginning, in order to be an exceptional athlete, you have to make the jump to the varsity level. For example, boys hockey. We won't bring any 7th or 8th grader and put them on a JV team. They would have to be exceptional and make that jump. That allows us a little flexibility. So the other component is that 7th and 8th graders are not displacing anybody that is cut. They are an addition to that roster, and whatever our coaching staff deems is that appropriate roster size for that year, they're going to make the appropriate cuts, and then if they feel that 7th or 8th grader is exceptional, they would be added an additional student athlete on that team. So since specifically we talked about the boys soccer program and some of those specific ones, we've made the adjustment, and this is why I think the policy is really good right now, is we've made the adjustments on our end and looked at boys soccer and said, in order to be exceptional, you have to make that varsity team. So we've cut back on that ability for a soccer athlete to make the jump to the sophomore team and play on that sophomore team, or the JV team and play on that JV team. And I think it's appropriate due to the number of cuts that we've been making in boys soccer. And I understand how the public and the parents can feel like that people are getting cut and then we're bringing up 8th graders. And so viewing the number of cuts, we made that determination this last fall that we would adjust that specifically to boys soccer. We've reviewed this policy with our coaches council. They are in full support. We also reviewed it with our Student Activities Advisory Council, SAC, and they are in full support of the current policy as well. And we did make, I talked about some slight language adjustments with the appendix, and I think that's in your notes. And one of you, I don't remember who had a highlight, what is the for learning? And so we did make some adjustments and said that the athlete being moved to the high school level must fit the criteria of an accelerated track for skill development due to the lack of opportunity that he may have at the 7th and 8th grade level. And again, fully anticipating that he'd be a varsity contributor in that first or second year. So I'll open it up for any other questions.
The only comment I wanted to make is we had a fairly robust discussion around the definition of an exceptional athlete, which is how we got this language, which I think is an improvement, because even amongst the three of us in the policy committee, we had completely different interpretation of what exceptional athlete would mean. So I appreciate the language that you brought to clarify what exceptional athlete means, and it's really an athlete, student athlete that's outgrown what the opportunity that they have at the 7th or 8th grade level from a skill development perspective. So. Yes,
similar to the classroom, we want to try and find the best learning experience for them, and we think this is a good win for both the student athlete and their development in the program.
Can I ask a quick question? So are there any sports that have a cap on rostering? Are there any exist from an outside conference or whatever? Are there any sports now that would have the capability of having an exceptional athlete put on, but are capped at the number of kids we can actually have on a roster?
So the only cap we have is when it comes to section tournament play, and we have a roster cap that's able to participate in that varsity competition. So, for example, it might be 22 for basketball, right? So we would have to follow that. And each sport has that set amount. But it doesn't mean that we can't take on more and have them be a part of our program during the regular season.
I just wanted to say thank you for looking at the boys soccer specifically, and really looking at the implementation and the management piece of that and how the policy impacts that. So I think that is, you've shown a great effort in doing that, and with the coaching too, and so I wanted to applaud you for that. I have a quick question. So if an exceptional athlete comes up and plays varsity as a 7th grader, are they only allowed to get a varsity letter for 4 years?
So
do you know what I mean? Like if an 8th grader pops up to varsity as a eighth grader.
Yep.
But how many years can he compete at the varsity level and get letters?
So each of our programs determine what their lettering policy is.
Okay.
So depending on that program, it's possible they could letter in each grade that they're up.
So they could letter 5 years?
It's possible.
It's possible?
Yes.
I didn't know if it was against any Minnesota high school league rules or anything
it's
for
not.
that. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, my only comment for the additional language here is I would use the gender neutral instead of him, her.
As soon as I read it, yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Are there any comments? Did you get the comment about changing it to gender neutral?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other, did you have a comment, Owen, on this?
Yeah, I did. I can go with the language as it is, and with the assurance that you've had, Troy, for not displacing athletes, because it was fairly touching for me to think about that and hear that, because my concern was that one of the issues is that we're breaking up cohorts of players. They've played with each other since elementary school and then through middle school, and all of a sudden we have an exceptional athlete who could be a leader and oftentimes is, and that cohort is missing that individual. The other is, I've sometimes wondered how necessary it is for an exceptional athlete to go up, and if they're really losing that much of an opportunity. And I've known an exceptional athlete who just started running varsity in 10th grade and then went on to win the Big Ten 1,500 meter and wasn't held back by that. And so it raised questions for me about being excessively competitive, and I think you addressed that, and I guess I want the community to know that we talked about that and we take this earnestly, because sports are for the entire student body. And it's not exclusionary to talk about exclusionary and inclusionary, that we are trying to be a big tent for all sorts of students. And we do exceptionally well, winning 8 state championships last year, 3 already? So I think we owe it to the community to take an issue like that earnestly, and I think we have. So with that, then, Erica, I can just modify the language and we can move forward with the vote, or with the vote next month.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up, Owen. And I appreciate you being here, Troy. I think that concludes our policy discussion. Thank you. Thank you both. That concludes our discussion portion of our agenda tonight. We're going to move on to the action portion, and we have 4 items tonight up for action, starting with the Edina Community Center renovation bid. Do I have a motion to approve the Edina Community Center renovation bid?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
John Toop, you're up on this topic.
Yeah, I'll just speak very quickly on this. If the board recalls, we did reject the fire suppression bids a couple of board meetings ago, so we did conduct the bid on January 16th. The letter is written by Kraus Anderson on January 17th. The bid was acceptable this time around, so I would recommend that the board approve it, and it is within budget on the ECC project that we're doing.
Do board members have questions? No? We'll now vote by roll call to approve the Edina Community Center renovation bid. Aye.
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 The Edina Community Center renovation bid is approved. Next up are the strategic plan directions. Do I have a motion to approve the strategic plan directions?
So moved.
Second.
Great. John, are you leading us on this topic?
I know that I would be glad to.
That's what was written down.
So the board, over the last few months, have solidified 5 strategic directions, mission and vision statement, as well as clarified values. The administration is beginning its thinking around the implementation. So this is really the board's approval of the direction that we're taking the implementation plan. And I would say to the community, there is more to come. We'll continue to add to the plan as time rolls on.
Great. I just wanted to add in a couple of things for the community. If tonight's document is approved, our administration will continue to draft their action steps and metrics for the final strategic plan. For next steps, the community, just so you guys know, there will be a board work session on March 2nd, where the board is going to discuss the process of prioritizing implementation steps. Another board work session on March 9th, where the board is going to review proposed implementation steps from the district, and an April 13th work session where the board will review and discuss refined implementation steps and metrics. The board and administration are both targeting late spring for approval of the final strategic plan for the district. And I also wanted to mention a final note that once the strategic direction document is approved, there could be some minor semantic changes to it due to a standard editing processes. Now I'll open up to the rest of the board for any comments or questions that you have or would like to make before we vote on this.
Yeah, I had a question for John, because we, at our last work session, when we were redrafting the mission statement and the vision statement, we were going to get some feedback, and I was just wondering what you had heard about our mission. This is, and just to say, this is the first time that I've seen it actually typed up, the latest version of the mission and vision.
So I had a few lead team members look it over, and we're presenting what's in front of you.
Okay. Is it possible for us to pass the rest of the document and get some additional feedback on the mission and vision?
Feedback from whom?
Either both the district lead team, maybe our district leaders, PTO leaders, or just what I'd like to do is, these are really strikingly different statements than what the community saw when we sent it out for feedback. So I was just wondering if we could just get some more feedback on them. It would just be separating those statements from the rest of the strategies so that the district can continue on with the strategies. But since I think that the mission and vision are really critical elements, and because they've changed so much, I just want to make sure that it resonates with the rest of the community.
I'm not opposed to putting it in front of some people in an informal way. I don't think that doing any sort of formal surveys or anything at this point are a great idea. I don't necessarily think that we need to take it out of the document and approve them separately, because I think that since these are strategic directions to give to the administration to work on implementation steps, I think that we can still get informal feedback, and if we need to make semantic changes to the mission and vision, we can do that at the same time. I don't think that precludes us from approving this document, that, in my opinion.
Because once we get the implementation steps and metrics, then we're going to have a full strategic plan that will come back for approval, correct?
Right.
And so somewhere in those stages, if there is a change we want to make to anything in the document, then I think, particularly I should say the mission or the vision for semantics, we could do it at that point.
Which I think they need some work anyway, because I think that from when we finished our work session Thursday to when this went public Friday, there wasn't a ton of time to even refine. So I think that they need some work anyway. I think there will be some refinement to those two statements. I just don't necessarily think that if we take it out of the document right now, then we're going to have to bring it back next month for approval. I don't think it necessarily gains us anything from a process perspective, if knowing that it's going to need to be refined some.
Well, I was just clarifying then. I mean, this is my reaction to the two statements. It would be nice to have the community be aware of what the process will be, so that they can either they can understand where we're coming from with these. And if there's when we say semantic changes, I just want to be pretty clear on what we're talking about and discuss it with the rest of the board. I'm glad that you agree that they need to be looked at again. And so, and I don't particularly care if they don't get pulled out, but as long as the process takes place, that we can re-look at these two, I would really appreciate it.
Well, I just want to clarify, when I say look at them, I don't mean that we need to I think that what we agreed to as a board was, and it's my understanding at the work session, we agreed to as a board to meld the two, some thoughts from what Julie had proposed and some thoughts from what we had before. And so what we came up with, I don't think from a grammatical perspective is necessarily the best thing from a grammatical perspective, but the thoughts and the main ideas, I don't see us going back and re-engineering those thoughts, because I think we keep re-engineering and re-engineering and re-engineering, and we never get to a point where we are like, okay, this is what our mission statement is going to be. Now we need to actually edit it from a grammatical perspective. So my concern is if we keep going back and re-engineering the main thoughts behind the mission statement, we're actually never going to get to a final mission statement. So I think that at some point as a board, we're going to have to say, these are the thoughts we want in the mission statement. And I was hoping we were there, but maybe I'm wrong. So I think if we're going to reopen up the process of the mission and vision statement, then that is a different process than what I'm talking about, which is if there are mechanics that we need to change in the mission and vision, that's different to me.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of opening up the discussion again on mission and vision, other than clarifying grammar issues or clarifying a point in it, but not to reopen it. I mean, we've been through this for months at this point.
And I completely agree. I realize that we've been going through this for months, and I'm actually looking forward to finishing this. I think we're very close. I think that these are very close to being done, but I would like to make sure that we also get feedback from other people. So in that process, besides just a grammatical thing, I would like to open that up to not a survey, but and I'm open to whomever you feel is appropriate for that. But this board has been kind of working a little bit in a silo on these. After we got the feedback, we reiterated, we rewrote them once, we rewrote them again, and then at our last work session, we got new ones that we just looked at that contained a lot of the stuff that we had before, but I just would like to get somebody else's feedback, that's all.
Alan, by way of clarification, are you meaning that we would put this into discussion for next month, or we put it into action for next month, or?
No, it doesn't. If we can at least have a process of reworking the wording in here, we could approve these as is with the understanding that the mission and vision statements will be reviewed again.
I'm fine with that.
Can I just add one thing? I agree that they're not in final polished form. I think that as the strategic plan implementation plan comes out, we can take another look too at the through lines to make sure that semantically it all works, or semantically, I said that wrong. But one of the things I do want to say, I didn't just draft new mission and vision statements, as you kind of implied that I just came. I think, Erica, you said that Julie just brought them. I did not do that. That was through the communication on our district lead. So I just wanted to clarify that actually came from feedback from the district lead. And it was similar language because it was looking at it from a marketing view. And when I say marketing, it's just communication, not necessarily marketing. More communication. Are we clear about the mission and vision? And does it make sense? And is it easy to understand so that there's no misinterpretation of what we're trying to say? So I just wanted to clarify those two things, so.
Julie, in addition to that, though, that you did base it on the feedback that we received from the community.
It was based on all the
Right.
feedback, which was, I don't know how many pages that is, 112 pages. Look through the language. It was also based on what was already looked at and what we had discussed. So the sentiment and the intent of the mission and vision, I believe, stayed very similar to what our board as a whole discussed. It was just language changes so that they were more digestible.
I think what you did, Julie, and I apologize if I implied that you just brought them, you did bring in lead team and our communications department, and I think what you're asking for, Ellen, is perfectly acceptable as well and a good idea. So I think it's fine to, in my opinion, to approve it, knowing that we need to do some work on the mission and vision statement.
And I agree with all of that, so thanks.
Does anyone have any more comments? Okay. We'll now vote by roll call to approve the strategic plan directions. Aye.
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up is policy 601. Do I have a motion to approve policy 601?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. John, your name is on this one as well.
Well, this is discussion the board had at their January 6th. Discussion the board had at the January 6th. And I'll just read the last sentence in the background paragraph where it discussed implementation of Section 5K that has been put on hold, and a work group to review policy 601 is in process. We do have that in process. I think that meeting might also be scheduled at this point. It is therefore appropriate to reinstate the version of policy 601 that was in place before November 18th, 2019, until further consideration may be made by the board. So the recommendation that's before the board here is to reinstate the version of policy 601 that was in place before November 18th, 2019, until further consideration may be made by the board.
Thank you, John. Do any board members have comments about the vote on policy 601?
I would rather we not rescind policy 601 5K. As I said in our last board meeting, I think it gives our students voice and choice on 7 classes that they don't have. It renews our commitment and makes our commitment to the GT community made 3 years ago. It meets the needs of all of our students as in a way that I think heterogeneous classes can't. 80% of our students are over 50%, or 50% of our students are over 80%. The community would like it. Many in the community would like it, and I think it'd be an educational opportunity that we're passing. And I really hope that we can, in the subsequent meetings that we're going to be having about 601, can retain as much of the spirit of what 601 5K intended.
Anyone else? Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll now vote by roll call to approve policy 601. Aye.
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
Jones? Nay. Michelson?
Nay.
Shaw?
Aye.
Aye.
Policy 601 is approved. Next up are polling locations. Do I have a motion to approve? Is that the right verbiage?
Yes.
Polling locations.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
John, do you want to give a quick background to this?
I would like that.
Okay.
I would love that.
So we have Highlands Elementary that was pointed out to us that is going to be used as I believe on your sheet, a temporary polling place for the March 3rd presidential primary. And we did not know about that until today. So we thought we'd put this in front of you to approve it as a polling place, even though it's only on an interim basis for calendar year 2020. Because I think they're going to use it for November election as well.
And this is due to construction at the
Edina Senior Center?
Yeah, Senior Center, right.
Yeah. There's also a couple notes that we also put down there so that the public is aware that a couple of polling addresses have changed that do not impact the school district as well. And I think those are highlighted in red on your form. So just to give you an up-to-date list of all the polling places, and this was approved with City of Edina through Hennepin County without our knowledge on the Highlands one, but wanted to get that in front of you tonight.
Are there any concerns from a staffing perspective at Highlands for security or any?
I do not know that yet. I'm
Okay.
going to be checking on that.
Okay.
Being we just learned about it today.
Right.
Can I ask a question? Do we have any recourse? Can we push back? Oh.
No, we don't.
Okay. Thanks. Stay.
Just checking. This is a good question.
And during the general election, would this be also the polling place?
Yes, it's my understanding that they'll be using it for the March 3rd presidential primary as well as the 2020 general election.
And are we in school then?
No, I believe we have that
We have
day
that
off. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Are there any other questions about this? Okay, we'll now vote by roll call to approve the polling locations.
Ellenberg,
Aye.
Fox,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Jones. Aye. Michelson,
Aye.
Shaw,
Aye.
Waller Freeman.
Aye.
The polling locations are approved, and that concludes our action items. We do have some additional staff recognition tonight that I wanted to share. We have a commendation for Kylie Muehlberg, a grade 1 teacher at Cornelia Elementary, and Diane Swenson, a special education teacher at Cornelia Elementary. In an email from a parent, it says, "This email is just a note of appreciation from a father for Kylie and Diane. Our child is in first grade at Cornelia Elementary, and we really appreciate the efforts of Kylie Muehlberg and Diane Swenson. Thanks again." And then we have a commendation of Dr. Carrie Dahlquist, the principal of Creek Valley Elementary, and the Creek Valley staff, in an email from a parent to Superintendent Schultz. "I want to take this opportunity to commend Principal Dahlquist on her wonderful school. My children were welcomed with open arms by their teachers and classmates. In these few short months, they have developed a strong sense of belonging at Creek Valley and will always consider it their school. They regularly sing the CV anthem, recite the 7 habits, also in song, and show me on a daily basis how at home they have felt since day one at Creek Valley. Every teacher I have come into contact with has been open, caring, and helpful. So a huge thank you to Principal Dahlquist, because I know she sets the tone for this wonderful culture, and from my entire family for providing our children with an unforgettable experience." So thank you, and feel free to email the school board with any staff commendations you would like to send us. Do we have any leadership updates or committee reports?
So the only committee update from Teaching and Learning is that at the last meeting, we spent some time talking about methods to evaluate courses. So new course proposals and what kind of metrics that would make sense, what it is that we would want to know as a district in terms of a course evaluation.
I have one announcement that I'd like to read from the 2020 census we count. And this is for the community in Edina. The U.S. Constitution mandates that everyone in the country be counted every 10 years in order to make decisions about funding and representation. Census Day is right around the corner on April 1st, 2020. You'll be receiving postcards from the U.S. Census Bureau in March telling you to complete the 2020 census either online, over the phone, or via the paper form. If you do not complete it one of these ways, a Census Bureau employee will visit your residence to obtain the information. It is certainly preferable to complete the form early. There are 10 questions on the census form, and you must complete the information for everyone living in your household, family, or not. There's no citizenship question, and all information you provide is confidential. It is not shared with any federal, state, or local government agencies. The information is used to determine how many U.S. representatives each state gets, how federal funds are distributed to support schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and other vital programs, or businesses choose to locate based on population. For more information on the census, go to www.bettertogetheredina.org/EdinaCCC.
Thank you, John. You're welcome. Any other updates or committee reports?
I have one. This is just a quick update from not update, but just a comment from the Community Education Services Advisory Council. I just wanted to acknowledge the wood shop guys and girls down there. They have made ukulele racks for the elementary schools to hold the ukuleles that came in from the music program. And I just wanted to say that publicly and applaud them for that. But when we talk about the importance of community education and that connection with our community and with our students, that's what it looks like. And it's just, he keeps getting requests for more ukulele racks. So I just thought that was something to acknowledge that came from our meeting.
And Julie, I'll also add that in case people don't know this, without ukulele racks, the teachers actually spend more time outside of the classroom having to tune the ukuleles. So it's also a good process thing too. So.
Thank you for the ukulele racks from the Edina School Board. I think that is it. And unless there are any objections, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.